Camila had just parked her car outside the supermarket when the expensive phone in her purse began to ring. She sighed irritably, thinking it was from work, and picked up the phone. But when she heard the voice, her spouse immediately changed her tone. "Yes, Jasper, I'll be home soon. I'll get some groceries for the weekend, and then I'll come straight to you. Have you had dinner?" "I haven't." "Waiting for me?" "Oh, that's nice. I'll be there soon. Don't miss me." Camila was a businesswoman in her late teens, but she looked great. She spent a lot of time looking after herself, beauty salons and massages, fitness centers and expensive boutiques. With her stubby, trim figure, the woman looked much younger than her years. Her husband's business, the shoe business, now rested solely on her, and she had no right to let him down. That's why Camila was busy day and night, not knowing rest. Procurement, recruitment, personnel control, accounting audits and reports, important negotiations, all this fell on her fragile female shoulders. Her husband 5 years ago was confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life. The accident was to blame, but they started from scratch together, shoulder to shoulder. First they traded at the market, then they opened their own shop, then another, and the business went from there. Since her husband Jasper barely survived, Camila has taken on everything: the house, the business, family life. Sometimes it was so hard that she just wanted to howl from exhaustion. But she always restrained herself. At the peak of emotion, she wiped her tears and went into battle. Her arms and legs were in place. No need to whine. Jasper was 100 times worse off, and he lived. The woman's character was very stubborn. She had a lot of determination and persistence. She loved her husband very much. Camila and Jasper, despite all the difficulties and hardships of life, managed to carry this bright feeling through life without losing a drop. But they had no luck with her husband's carer. Then irresponsible, then rude. The last one started stealing jewelry money. Jasper, of course, could do a lot of things on his own, but still he could not do without help all day long. Every day he had to have massages and treatments. In these thoughts and worries, Camila got out of the car and walked towards the supermarket. Outside the shop, she suddenly noticed a young girl dressed very poorly. She was wearing only a thin, shabby jacket, a scarf instead of a hat, and autumn boots on her feet. She was holding the hand of a boy of about 5 years old. He was dressed better, warmer. It was obvious that the mother spared no money for the child, but she obviously saved money on herself. They tramped outside the shop. The son was pulling his mother by the hand, and the woman's eyes were so sad and hopeless. She looked around fearfully from side to side, as if she didn't know where to go. Camila had a trained eye and could see at once that the woman was neither a beggar nor a thief. She was just confused and did not know what to do. For some reason, Camila felt unbearably sorry for this poor young mother, and she thought, what if she was offered to be a nurse? She wouldn't steal. Giving in to the impulse of emotion, Camila approached the stranger and asked her directly, "Hello, my name is Camila. I see that you are upset about something or have something happen to you. I can offer you a job if you need one. Would you like to be a carer for my disabled husband? Decent pay is guaranteed. What I need from you is honesty and integrity, because the last carer had a nerve and started stealing. Now it is difficult to find qualified, decent staff." The young woman looked at her dazed and perplexed. You must agree that it is not every day that strangers on the street offer jobs to passers-by, so she was clearly confused. "I'm Amanda. I really need a job right now. Are you sure you're not cheating?" "I'm not alone, I'm with my son. I mean, as it happens, we don't have a place to live. Is it possible with accommodation?" "I'd probably refuse. I'm afraid I'll end up in a brothel somewhere. And then what will happen to my son?" Camila smiled amiably, took out her business card. "Look, my husband and I have our own shoe business. We have been living and working here for many years. Everybody knows us. I run in some serious circles. So don't worry, it's not a scam or some kind of slavery. I just need a good nurse, not a thief and not lazy. If you work hard, I won't begrudge you any money. So, Amanda, do you agree?" "It's all right. It's a big mansion. We'll give you your own room with your son. What's the boy's name?" The young woman answered, "Alex is his name. But you don't know me at all. Maybe I'm a thief too." Camila laughed. Believe me, I've been working with people for years, and I know how to understand people. You're not a thief. You're probably in a bad situation. Am I right? I can see it in your eyes. You look scared to death, confused." Amanda's eyes immediately brimmed with tears. "You were right. It's the worst. My mom died and my stepdad threw me and my son out on the street. This is the bag with all our stuff in it. Thank you. I'll do it. I'll take good care of your husband. You won't regret hiring me. Alex is calm, not spoiled. He won't be a problem. Camilla smiled. Good, get in the car. It's warm. The baby's getting cold. I'll quickly buy groceries and we'll go. It's a deal. I'll be right back. As Amanda walked with her son to the car, Camilla noticed that the boy was limping badly on his right leg. At the supermarket, the businesswoman bought 4 huge bags of food. She didn't forget about the baby. She bought him some toys, coloring books, pencils, and sweets. He's got to have something to do. I felt sorry for the boy, so young and already in trouble. On the way home, Camilla couldn't bear to ask, Amanda, I noticed that Alex is limping a lot. What's wrong with him? I'm not asking out of idle curiosity, just to see if there's anything I can do to help him. It's not something he's had since birth. The young mom sighed and answered, No, Alex was born healthy. A year ago, he climbed a tree in the garden, but he fell unluckily and broke his leg. They put a plaster cast on it in the village, but the doctor was inexperienced. It didn't heal properly, so now he has to have an expensive operation. But I don't have that kind of money yet. I hope I'll earn it. Then I'll spend it all on my son. He's the most precious thing in my life. Amanda and Alex timidly entered the huge country mansion. She had never seen such luxury, and the baby even more so. Alex was shying away from her and was very shy. After all, the surroundings were unfamiliar. A very nice elderly man with glasses and a neat beard came to meet them in a wheelchair. When he saw Camilla, he was overjoyed. He and his wife embraced tenderly. Then he looked at Amanda and Alex and smiled at them. Good evening. Do we have company? What's the charming boy's name? Let's get acquainted. I'm Jasper Russell, the owner of this house. And he extended his hand to the boy in a manly manner. The little boy responded in a serious manner. My name is Alex and my mom's name is Amanda. Our surname is Smith. Camilla explained the situation to her husband. Darling, I found you a carer. Amanda is in desperate need of a place to live and a job, and we need a carer. I think we could use Alex, don't you? You don't mind kids in the house. The man winked at the baby. I'm all for it. I won't be bored. Alex, come on. I'll show you something interesting. I have a real frigate. You'll love it. I spent 3 months building it myself. All the parts are real. You can't tell the difference. It even moves. Alex immediately forgot about his shyness and followed Jasper to his office with interest. Camilla and Amanda went to the kitchen to sort out the packages and cook dinner. They were doing so deftly. They chatted nicely, and within an hour they were all eating dinner together, talking business over potatoes and Greek salad. That's how Amanda came to live and work at the Russells' house. I must say she was very happy and comfortable here. With Jasper, she immediately found a common language. She performed all her duties as a carer to the best of her ability. If something was awkward or clumsy at first, he didn't scold her. He patiently told her how to do it correctly. Alex liked it here too. Jasper taught him to play dominoes and checkers. They read syllables together and made aeroplanes out of paper. The man even seemed to forget about his serious illness in the presence of the child. Now his days did not drag on like a dull gray mass, but flew rapidly. Amanda and Camilla became very close. Often in the late afternoon they could sit over a cup of coffee and have a simple, feminine chat. Camilla would tell the young woman about her life. Don't think, Amanda, that all this wealth fell out of the sky for me and my husband. He and I are both engineers. We studied at university in parallel streams. That's where we met. We crammed together in libraries. We used to write notes, even cheat sheets for exams. Jasper was so funny, tall, skinny, gangly, and a bit of an ersor. He tried to court me shyly, complimenting me. And then he'd say something really stupid. I just laughed and did not take him seriously at all. I've always had a lot of admirers, but Jasper was a stubborn one. He followed me around. Where I go, he goes, he stays right behind. We were just friends at first. One day I was late on my way to the hostel for my girlfriends. I was late, it was night, and then 2 hooligans attacked me. They started to take my purse. They grabbed my gold earrings and wanted to rip them off. I screamed, but there was no one around. And then Jasper came out of the ground and gave them a beating. He took a pretty good beating, though. He had to have his eyebrows stitched up, but he saved me, risked his life, didn't let me get hurt. And that's when I looked at him differently. I thought, I'm not going to be lost with him. We started seeing each other, and I fell in love with him, not immediately, but gradually. So I still love him to this day. We've been through so much together. We've been through all sorts of things. In the 90s, our research institute closed down. We started trading, And there was racketeering, theft, and moneylessness. We had a son, Miles, and raised him. And not once have I regretted that I connected my life with this man. Our son was such a clever boy. He was an excellent student, graduated from high school with a gold medal. Then it's a pity he didn't want to go into science. After university, he went into business too. He separated from us, lived on his own. We bought him a flat. And then there was this terrible accident. He and his dad were on their way back from a business meeting at a restaurant. Miles started fooling around, driving cause he was drunk, but he wouldn't call a taxi. So he lost control of the car. They hit a bridge abutment. The son died on the spot, and the husband underwent 2 complicated operations. He was literally put back together piece by piece. He never got back on his feet. It was such a terrible time. I still haven't come round, even though it's been 5 years. At the time, I thought I'd go mad with grief. The funeral of my only son, my husband's surgery, my business began to crack at the seams and collapse. I couldn't take it, that's all. I took my son's photo, his things to the attic. I couldn't bear to look at his portrait. My soul was torn. Jasper, too, had fallen into a deep depression. It's no joke to become a helpless invalid in an instant. He and I underwent a long course of treatment with a therapist. It was he who advised us to become a team again, so that I could take over my husband's business. And he helped me from home with all the business matters. That's how we live now. Except that business takes up most of my time. The house is always empty. The husband alone here will soon forget what I look like. I'm so glad you're here with us now. Alex, I can see how Jasper's come round in a month. He's unrecognizable. He used to lie in bed with the curtains closed till 12:00. And even if he didn't get up, it was heartbreaking to look at him. And I can't do anything about it. If I sit at home, I'm out of business. And I feel sorry for my husband. I mean, he wants to hang out with me too. Why are you out on the street, Amanda? And who's Alex's father? Why isn't he around? Are you divorced? You don't tell me anything about yourself. The young woman sighed and replied, "That's because there's nothing to tell. I'm from the country myself. My father left the family when I was not even a year old, so I lived alone with my mom. It was hard. I had a big farm. I helped her with everything. She was so tired, poor thing. She worked in the garden and on the farm from dawn till dusk. No matter how you look at it, it's hard for a woman alone in the countryside. And when I was 13, she brought her stepfather, that awful Sebastian, and it was hell for us. He helped a little at first, but then he started drinking. He got more and more violent. I begged my mom 100 times to leave him, but she wouldn't. I was afraid of him. I was also worried about what people would say in the village. Many men drink, and it's not considered shameful. So I barely waited until I finished school and immediately went to the city, no matter where, just to get away from the unbearable stepfather. I felt sorry for my mom. She suffered with him. But what could I do? I rented a room in a hostel, got a job as a waitress in a cafe, and then I fell in love. And the next thing you know, it's all banal. I had a fight with my boyfriend. It's a very painful subject for me. Can I not tell you about it? I'm going to cry. Amanda took a deep breath. I had to go back home to give birth. Mom, of course, forgave me, accepted it. She and I sewed nappies and cradles together. She simply adored her grandson. She had no heart for him. But my stepdad got even more upset than before. He shouted that I am a foolish bastard of his fattened up and brought on his neck, and he doesn't need a spunger. And my fellow villagers were washing their bones in the village. It's always like this. When I go out to the shop with my baby, I hear behind me, "Oh, my mother sent her to work, and she brought it in her hem. Shameless. Who is the father?" I don't know. I don't know who. She's such a whore. As long as my mother was alive, Alex and I still tolerated it, although our nerves and strength were already at their limit. Alex was scared to climb a tree because his kind stepfather threatened to whip him with a belt. And then Mom died. Heart couldn't take the abuse. She had a massive heart attack. After her funeral, my stepdad said to me, "I don't need you here with your bastard. Otherwise, I'll give you such a sweet life, you'll not be surprised. I'm not old yet. Maybe I'll get married. Why are you here? Where you took your son for a walk. Go and live there. Stop sitting on my neck. What was I supposed to do?" It's his house. Mom sold our house a long time ago, and he promised to put the money in the bank, didn't he? But he drank every penny of it. So we left, wherever the hell we wanted to go. I was just getting off the bus at the supermarket, standing there almost crying. What to do? I can't imagine. One suitcase of stuff for both of us. That's my whole life. No money, nowhere to go. So God sent you to me, that's why. Thank you, Camila, for sheltering me, for giving me a job. You pay good wages. If I do something wrong, you just tell me. I'll fix it in a jiffy. The tears came to Camila's eyes. She thought, God, so young, so much suffered. And there was no light in my life. It's incomprehensible. I should help the boy. It is not good to limp like this. He still has a whole life to live, Camila thought. And out loud, the woman said, Nothing, Amanda. There will be a holiday on our street. Don't be discouraged. You and I have been talking about sad topics for the night. Let's have a drop of brandy. I'll get Jasper and go to bed. Tomorrow I'll make an appointment for you and your son to see an orthopedist at a private clinic. Let him see what's wrong with his foot. Another couple of months flew by. Camila was very happy with her carer. Now she could go about her work in peace, and knew that when she arrived home in the evening she would find a delicious dinner, a clean house, and a happy husband. Amanda cooked marvelously and gave her husband regular massages, and he stopped complaining about exhausting pains in his legs and drinking handfuls of painkillers. So Camila paid Amanda a very decent salary and gave her bonuses. The young woman was finally able to tidy herself up, and she was very transformed and beautiful. She made a beautiful hairstyle, a delicate manicure, bought some fashionable things, and, of course, with persistence, she saved money for Alex's operation, not forgetting to spoil him with toys and goodies. The baby was also wonderful, calm, not by years mature and sensible. Soon Camila and Jasper's wedding anniversary was coming up, 40 years together. The jubilarians decided to celebrate the celebration in the most expensive restaurant in the city. Because in recent years, Camila has already forgotten what a holiday is. No light, one endless work. So she wanted to throw away all her worries and relax for one evening. To drink a little, to eat good food and listen to good music, to dance, after all, and distract from all the problems. And Jasper hardly ever left the house, except to the hospital for a checkup. It would do him good to be out in the community, too. After all, disability isn't the end of life, and he's become quite the recluse. Amanda was invited to be the host's carer. It took 3 weeks to organize the party. In the end, everything was perfect. The tables were bursting with exquisite delicacies. Pleasant music was playing. Guests were socializing, eating, drinking expensive wines. Among the invited guests were both business partners and just friends and close people. Jasper was present in person. And nothing that he was in a wheelchair. Still, he looked very dignified. Guests congratulated the couple, gave expensive gifts, but somewhere in the middle of the celebration, a famous pop singer was to come to perform. Camila specially hired her to intrigue and surprise the guests, and now everyone is waiting for the show. And then it turns out that the star is ill and cannot come. Her art director called and canceled the show. That's an unforeseen situation. The guests asked for songs, and Camila was in a panic and did not know how to tell them that the singer would not come. And then suddenly Amanda whispered to her, "If you want, I can sing. I'm certainly not a singer or a superstar, but I used to be good at it." Camila was very surprised and even more upset. She thinks how it all would not spoil the impression of the soiree. But what can an ordinary village woman perform? Ditties or something? They'll laugh, she thought. But Jasper suddenly supported the proposal, nodded his head and said into the microphone, "100 guests. We have a little emergency. The artiste is ill and will not be coming. What can you do? Everything happens in life. But don't worry, we won't be without songs and entertainment." Amanda, my carer and a very good person, decided to surprise us and sing a song as a gift for our anniversary. Let's give her a round of applause. The tipsy guests clapped and waited, wondering what would happen next. They had never seen such a thing before. That businessmen of such a level let some nurse on the stage. Even wondered what was going to happen now. But a little worried, Amanda walked onto the stage, looked around, and was even more frightened. A large number of very important people were looking at her. How not to embarrass herself? She greeted the guests and said quietly, "Today is a big celebration. It is the anniversary of beautiful people who have helped me in life and supported me in a difficult moment. I want to sing you a love song. It is very dear to me, because it is a memory of my favorite person. He loved it very much, and often sang it to me. Please don't judge me too harshly. I am not a singer, and I am far from the world of show business, just from the heart and from the bottom of my heart." Amanda took the microphone in her hands and sang, "The day will silently replace the night outside the window. My beloved shines with coolness, in the rain with wet silver. With the coming of September, gold leafall will cover the whole calm country. The autumn garden is slumbering, as if waiting for spring. It was so beautiful and wonderful, so sincere and heartfelt that they began to sing along and clap. And Camila sat and sobbed. Tears rolled down from her eyes without stopping, and everything was turning over in her soul. It was her late son Miles' favorite song. He played it often and always listened to it everywhere, at home and in the car, singing it in the shower. The young woman looked so organic and wonderful on stage. Long blonde curls, a minimum of makeup, and a simple but very elegant dress, emphasized by a thin belt. She had a natural charm that is rarely seen nowadays. The guests stopped drinking and eating and were mesmerized by her. When Amanda finished singing, they gave her a long applause, asked her to continue the concert, and she sang again and again, and so on for an hour. Her vocal cords were already noticeably sore from unaccustomedness, but nevertheless, Amanda was happy because becoming a singer was her unfulfilled childhood dream. She had been performing everywhere since kindergarten. Her teachers told her she had talent, but who needed it in the village? This talent. Get up early and work hard. And now it seemed to her that her dream was coming true right here and now. Many people filmed her performance on their phones and applauded. Amanda's voice was really very pleasant and melodious. When the guests finally let the nurse off the stage, she bowed to the audience, sat down at a table, and began to greedily drink water, glass after glass, trying to recover a little and catch her breath. She felt hot and unwell, the blood rushing to her face from the excitement she had experienced. After all, she had never performed in public before. So she decided to get some fresh air. Camila, noticing that Amanda was leaving, took her purse and followed her. She urgently needed to ask one question without delay, right here and now. Everything depended on it. The woman was shaking all over. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Was it really just a coincidence? Camila began at once without preamble. Amanda, you said from the stage that the song is a memory of your favorite person. Is that true? What was his name? A surprised Amanda nodded. It's true, his name was Miles. He's my first and so far only love of my life. But it's hard for me to talk about it. I'm sorry, can we not talk about it now? I've been worried sick enough as it is. I can't get myself right. I didn't even realize it was so scary to sing in public. Camila didn't stop. She couldn't do it later. She had to find out now immediately. She pulled a photo of her son out of her purse and held it out to Amanda. Do you know this man? Be honest, I need to know the truth. It's very important to me. Amanda took one look at the photo, cried out, and collapsed, right on the steps of the restaurant, senseless. Panic set in. There was a commotion. We called an ambulance, and while they were on their way, they tried to revive the woman on their own. They splashed her with cold water and slapped her cheeks. Finally, little by little, Amanda came round. Camila exhaled a sigh of relief. Amanda, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well? Were you overexcited when you were singing? You scared us all. The young woman suddenly burst into tears and said quietly, That guy in the photo is my first love and Alex's father. I never expected to see him. It's been so many years I can't forget. I can't get over it. Amanda continued her story. Who is he to you? Where did you get his picture? Camila was sobbing now. Jasper was just in shock. That's our son Miles, who died in an accident 5 years ago. So Alex is our grandson. Oh my God, what a blessing. I mean, we thought we were alone, without a single family member. It's just unbelievable. The guests, having learnt the stunning news, almost fell from their chairs. Wow, the son of the nurse turned out to be the grandson of businessmen. You don't always see that in soap operas. That's the anniversary. We didn't go for nothing. Already at home, sitting late at night in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, Camila asked, Amanda, tell me how you met Miles and why we knew nothing about it. What was the reason you broke up? You see, as a mom, I want to know everything that was going on with my son. It's important to me. I'm not going to judge you or accuse you of anything. I just want to know more about my son's life. Amanda sighed heavily and began her story. When I was working as a waitress, Miles used to come into our cafe for coffee and a snack. That's how we met. I liked him right away. He was such a cheerful, nice guy. He complimented me. Then one day he gave me a bouquet of flowers and asked me out on a date. I was so nervous, I thought I was going to die. Our love was mutual. I knew for sure, I felt with every cell that he loved me. We started dating. He was the first and only man I'd ever been with. Everything was so wonderful. The poems he read to me, the songs he wrote, the songs he sang in my ear, it felt so good. No one has ever looked after me like that. I still have it here in my soul. I thought we'd get married. I truly believed we'd be together for life. Miles introduced me to his friends. We went on a few camping trips. And then I started to feel nauseous and sleepy. I was stupid. I didn't realize what was going on for a long time. I thought I was poisoned or sick. And when I bought the test, I was shocked. Pregnant. I rang Miles straight away. I was on wings. I can imagine how happy he'll be, because it's his baby. Amanda continued her story. Already imagined how he introduces me to my parents. I saw myself in a wedding dress. It's so important for every girl. But when Miles heard this amazing news, he immediately lost his temper and started to persuade me to have an abortion. Amanda, how could you do that? I thought you were using protection. What kind of children at our age? I want to live for myself. I haven't told your parents anything yet. And now you're pregnant. Maybe we shouldn't rush into it. We have our whole life ahead of us. I love you a lot, but pregnancy wasn't in my plans, to be honest. But what kind of parents are we? I was so angry then, so hurt. I slapped him and ran away crying. Everything inside of me was so tight. How could it be? So sleeping with me was part of his plan, but a pregnancy that happened because of it was not. He called me several times and I didn't pick up the phone. I couldn't forgive him for those words. Much later, I hated myself for it. I'm sure Miles wanted to apologize and make up. He was really nice. He just got confused. And then he disappeared completely. I was in so much pain. I thought he'd left me. I only found out through acquaintances that he had died tragically. It was a disaster. I didn't even know who his parents were. So I had to quit my job and go home to my mom's village to give birth. That's the story. But Miles is still here in my heart. I can't forget him, that's all. I loved him very much, and he loved me too. I know that for a fact. Camila was in shock. Her head was spinning. My poor girl. I can imagine what you've been through, how you've suffered. But you have to admit, it was an incredible coincidence that I met you that day outside the supermarket. You wouldn't believe it. I looked at you and something in my soul turned upside down. It must have been fate that brought us together, I guess. You're the closest thing we have to family now. And so is Alex. Thank you, sweetheart, for not having an abortion and keeping the pregnancy alive. Gave us a grandchild. And don't hold it against Miles. Camila said softly. He's not a meanie. I'm sure he is. He was just very young and inexperienced at the time, so he didn't know what to say. Do you want us to go to his grave tomorrow? You've probably never been there. Amanda nodded quietly. I want to talk to him. Apologize to him too. We've both been good. He said something stupid. I took offense. Pride flared up in a stupid way. We had a fight and broke up, but things could have been very different. The next day, the women drove to the cemetery to visit Miles. Amanda stood frozen. For a long time, she looked at her favorite brown eyes with a squint from the portrait, and at the familiar dimple on her chin. Then suddenly she fell down on his grave and burst into tears. She stroked his portrait and whispered something to him for a long time. Camila sat quietly on the bench, realizing that it was the right thing to do. Let her cry. These are tears of purification. With each tear she shed, she would feel better. All the resentment and anger that had been accumulating all these years would go away, and her soul would finally become calm. Alex underwent a very complicated operation. Then there was a long rehabilitation. Amanda sat with him nonstop and Camila took over at the hospital. She and her husband paid for everything. They couldn't spare any money for their grandson. When the boy was discharged, they consulted and decided that it was time for him to tell the whole truth about his father and grandparents. Jasper took over this difficult conversation. He got on well with the boy and was sure he could find the right words to explain everything to him. In the evening, he drove the pram into Alex's room. He was drawing something, concentrating. The man looked at the drawing. There was a man, a woman and a child, also a sun, a sky and the sea. Jasper praised the boy. Great drawing. Let me guess who's here. That must be you. And that's your mum. And who's that? I don't get it, the boy said seriously. That's right, you guessed it. And this is my dad. I want him to be with us so much. When I ask my mum about my dad, she gets sad and kisses me and doesn't say anything. Jasper felt everything stir and turn inside him. He asked, "Would you like to have your own grandparents?" Alex smiled. Of course I would. Only my grandma died and there's no one else. It's just me and Mummy. Jasper cautiously started to get to the main point. No, Alex, you're wrong. You have your own grandparents. Do you want me to tell you a story? The boy nodded with interest and the man began the story. Your mom and dad loved each other very much, like a prince and princess in a fairy tale. But then it just so happened that they had a falling out. Adults sometimes do such irreparable stupid things. You'll understand when you grow up. And then Mummy gave birth to you. Such a nice boy. And Daddy, it just so happens he's not with us now. He's up there in heaven. That's why Mummy gets so sad when you ask her where Daddy is, you know? But you have your own grandparents. They just didn't know they had such a wonderful grandchild. Can you believe it? And now they do. Your grandfather is me, Alex, and your grandmother is Camila. That's the story. Are you happy about that? We'll never be apart now. We'll live together. If you want, we can go to the sea together in the summer. You've never been there. Alex jumped up and deftly climbed into Jasper's arms, wrapped his small arms around him and clung to him trustingly. How cool that you found yourself. I liked you right away for a reason. I knew you were good. The man felt such a wave of tenderness and love for his grandson that tears came to his eyes. He hugged the little guy in return, too. Alex, grandson. I'm really glad we found you, too. So, shall we go get to know Grandma in a new way? Alex nodded happily, and they left the room. Amanda and Camila were on pins and needles. They were all waiting to see how the conversation would end. The women were worried whether the baby would understand everything. But when a happy Alex ran up to Camila, hugged her, and said, Grandma, I'm glad you've been found, all their doubts were dispelled. Alex exclaimed, You are the best. You saved me and Mum. Camila cried tears of emotion and hugged her grandson too. Amanda followed with tears. It was so touching. Camila couldn't believe that she had been a grandmother for 5 years. She wanted to sing and dance and shout it to the world. Jasper gave his grandson the coolest phone, and the happy boy ran off to his room to play with it. Not half an hour later, he flew out again and told everyone, Mom, you're an internet star. Your songs have got 1,000 hits. You've got loads of likes and comments. Did everyone like the way you sing? Wow, my mom's a star. I'm going to tell everyone about it. Surprised Amanda could not understand anything. She wasn't really interested in the internet, but when she went to YouTube, she was astonished. It turns out that one of the guests posted on the network her performance at the anniversary, just for fun. And it instantly blew up the internet. She got fans and even a fan club. The woman had never dared to dream of such a frenzied popularity. After all, she is not a singer and did not learn it. How is this even possible? A few days later, representatives of the press and media companies came to Jasper's home and offered to record a new song in a professional studio and sign a cooperation agreement with them. The dumbfounded woman was in complete shock and didn't even know what to say. She was frightened and started to refuse. No way. I'm not a singer. And what if nothing happens? Disgraced? At the Jubilee, it was from the heart. I really wanted to sing this song, and I've never been to the studio. I don't know what to do there. I won't be able to cope. But the producer assured her. But don't be afraid of anything. I have been working for many years and have seen more than one pop star. So I'll tell you this. Sweetheart, more than half of them can't even sing. They're just the children of some insanely rich oligarch. And you're a natural. Believe me, there aren't many like you, so you'll do well, I'm sure. It's a matter of time. Camila supported Amanda. Well, at least give it a try. You have nothing to lose, but I have a feeling I'll have to look for a carer again, since my sister-in-law turned out to be a singer. What do you think? And Alex? Don't worry, we'll look after him. We'll find a nanny. But isn't this what you wanted? You said so yourself. Ever since you were a little girl, you wanted to be a singer. Well, your big break has come. Take it, there won't be another. Fate doesn't give out gifts like this every day. Trust me. You don't have to hide from opportunities. Go boldly to your dream and believe that it will come true and everything will work out. My husband and I believed in ourselves once, and we didn't fail. We achieved everything we wanted, and so can you. Amanda sympathized. Thank you for your kind words and encouragement. You're probably right. I'll give it a try. I've been there. And Amanda agreed to the tempting offer. It turned out that recording songs in the studio is very hard work. She had to rewrite 100 times, and her voice would break at the most inopportune moments. It took her a long time to get it right, but in the end, after a lot of effort on both sides, it all worked out. She was given a beautiful pseudonym, Mia, and completely changed her appearance. They persuaded her to become a platinum blonde. Amanda, for a long time, did not agree to cut and spoil her thick, naturally blonde curls. But then, grudgingly, she agreed. She decided that at least once in her life it is necessary to experiment. After all, professionals know better. Her eyes were blue, and her figure was just beautiful. Childbirth hadn't spoiled her at all. On the contrary, it made her a little softer and a little skinnier. That is, when Jasper and Camila finally saw Amanda perform, their mouths dropped open in amazement. The music channel presenter announced, "And now the premiere of a new song and a new rising star." An incredible beauty appeared on the screen that had nothing in common with the Amanda they knew. The blonde with an asymmetrical haircut in a white-colored dress looked simply stunning. She had a very interesting space makeup and looked like an alien in some ways. And when she sang, it was just amazing. Her voice was really very melodious and had such a variety of unusual shimmers. Fame and popularity literally descended on Amanda, and she woke up famous the very next day. The Russell house began to be besieged by journalists and obsessive fans, from which there seemed to be no escape. This, of course, at first turned Amanda's head. She could never have imagined such a fairy tale, she, a country simpleton. And in her wildest dreams, she couldn't have dreamed that she would be on TV and singing for the whole country. She started traveling for song recordings and solo performances. Everything spun so fast and swiftly that it completely took over the young woman. A sea of flowers, popularity, her songs were heard from every window. She began to be recognized everywhere. But soon she fully felt the other side of fame. She hardly saw her son anymore. He was always at his grandparents'. The kid was very upset and offended when she, not having time to be with him for a few hours, again packed up and left. Alex would cry and ask, "Don't you love me at all anymore?" Amanda stroked her son's head and tried to explain it all to "But I'll be back again soon. Aren't you happy with your grandparents? Do you want me to bring you the coolest robot?" Only the little boy twisted his head sadly. "Why would I need a robot if you're never home?" It was tearing the woman's heart to pieces. She realized that she was becoming more and more estranged from her son. The boy was becoming withdrawn and sad again. She used to be one with him. It became almost impossible to go out and just walk around. You had to smile, keep your face, and say only what was prescribed by the producers. After the performance, a buffet with champagne and the strongest headache in the morning, men looked at her a lot, and some made unmistakable hints of intimacy. Like, what's the big deal? In show business, it's normal. It was more exhausting than any job in the countryside. And Amanda was getting really tired of it. She wanted to cry more and more often, to close herself in 100 locks and run away from everyone, and just be a little alone with herself. One day at one of her recitals, she was given flowers by a very nice young guy. He modestly said, "Amanda, you sing so well. I didn't know Miles' fiancé had such talent." Amanda almost shrieked. "You knew Miles? I don't remember you. Have we met?" The guy smiled. "Crossed paths a few times in company. Remember when you and Miles used to come to our country house? We played love songs on the guitar until the night before. I really liked you back then. You didn't even look at me, unfortunately. You were completely absorbed in my friend, so I didn't bother you. But now I can get to know you better. Or does a star like you not meet ordinary guys anymore? My name's Kevin. Do you want to grab a coffee? Or do you want me to take you for a ride on my bike around the city at night? Anything you want. Just say the word." Amanda suddenly looked at him intently and said quietly, "I want you to take me away from everyone." Amanda said quietly, "I just want to sit in silence and be quiet. Can you give me a gift like that, Kevin? To have silence and not a living soul around. If you knew how tired I am of all this fuss." He didn't say anything but took her hand in his. He took her by the hand and led her out the back door in his concert suit. They climbed the outside stairs like thieves. Then he put her on a huge black motorbike, put her helmet on, and said, "Hold on tight." And off they went. Amanda had never experienced such drive and thrill. The night, the blinding headlights, the speed, and the sparkling summer wind. They drove for quite a long time. When her companion turned into the woods, Amanda tensed. There was no telling what this guy had in mind. But when she found herself in a lovely clearing near a lake outside of town, she was thrilled. They hardly spoke. They sat cuddled together on the edge of the shore, dangling their feet in the cool water and thinking to themselves. Kevin threw his warm leather biker jacket over her shoulders to keep her warm, and both of them felt so good together, so relaxed, and didn't need anyone else around. Amanda said quietly suddenly, "You know, I've only just realized that I don't want popularity or concerts. I'd like to be with my family, with my son, and no one else, you know. It's all so tinsel. I'm so exhausted. I don't see Alex at all, and he resents me, he misses me. I mean, we've never been apart for so long before. Kevin turned her sharply towards him and kissed her passionately on the lips without asking permission. She tried to pull away at first, but the passion overwhelmed her, and she responded to the kiss. A million electric shocks surged through her body. Her whole being quivered and begged for more. The young man said quietly, "Amanda, marry me." Amanda was stunned by such an unexpected proposal on the first night of their acquaintance, but then she remembered Camilla's story and replied, "I guess everything that's going on right now is completely crazy on my part, and I'm a fool. But I agree. I hope I don't regret it ever. I want to believe you, Kevin. I really do. I'm tired of being alone. I just want to be a weak woman." And they merged again in a passionate kiss and did not hold back their embrace until dawn. Amanda had not felt this good and peaceful in a long time, and it seemed as if they had known each other forever. They felt each other even without words. In the morning, back in the city, Amanda changed her life once again. She went completely into the shadows, agreed with the producer that there would be no public appearances, just recording songs occasionally and for the soul. Yes, it was a breach of contract and she was expected to pay a penalty. So be it. She took Alex away from her grandparents and went to live with Kevin in a 2-bedroom flat in the center. She was, of course, insanely scared. After all, she basically had absolutely no idea what kind of character he was. Would he love Alex? Would they get along? She didn't know why she had trusted so blindly. In fact, a complete stranger. She just felt in her gut that he wouldn't let her down, that's all. She disappeared from the stage and screens as suddenly as she appeared, and only sometimes on the radio sounded new hits with her voice. Fans continued to storm the Jasper house in the hope of catching her, but all in vain. They wondered how and why the rising star left the stage at the height of her popularity. I mean, it's stupid. She could have become famous for the whole country. They didn't realize that Amanda had just chosen a woman's happiness, and it was much more important than any shows and concerts, and you can't buy it with all the money in the world. Amanda and Kevin quietly signed the marriage and began to live as a normal family. Alex and the man immediately found a common language and got along. After all, the boy was very good-natured and open. The little boy sincerely rejoiced that his mother is now again near him, that there was a daddy, that they walked together, watch movies and ride bicycles in the park. Amanda had grown her beautiful blonde, long hair back, fit into her favorite jeans, wiped off tons of makeup and was herself again. There was no need to smile lusciously, answer tricky, uncomfortable questions, and stay for those cocktail parties, where almost every other man was trying to look under her skirt and pester her. She felt so good and comfortable in her little threesome world that she didn't need anything else. They didn't forget Grandpa and Grandma. They visited Alex regularly. Those closest to her understood her desire to go into the shadows, especially Jasper. "You did the right thing, girl." How many of them are there, starlets who went off into the sunset as quickly as they lit up, and live out their lives alone at the very bottom? Nobody wants them. Fame, alas, fleeting, but family it is forever. If you feel in your heart that you love, you should choose family. Alex was so worried when you were recording all the time. We didn't need toys, entertainment, or phones. He'd give it all up just to have his mom around. After all, childhood is only once, and you can't get it back. And it's hard to make up for lost time. So you're a good girl for realizing that. We're proud of you. I think Kevin is a good man. He won't let you down. Amanda gave Jasper a heartfelt hug. "Thank you for your support. I'm just apparently not a very public person. I don't like invasion of privacy. And none of this stuff is for me. It's much nicer for me to watch a film at home with my family than to answer questions from journalists. Now I record a few songs a month, and all this brings tangible income and pleasure to me. I like to sing, no matter how it is, and I don't need more than that. Kevin's my boy. He works for a construction company as a foreman, so he provides for us as well as a carer." Jasper laughed. "Well, more or less, but I certainly couldn't find a carer as soulful as you. But you have become our nearest and dearest, and Alex too, and I'm very happy about that. Camilla and I no longer feel like lonely old people who don't need anyone. I've already signed over the whole business to Alex when we're gone. It's all rightfully his. When he grows up, I'll teach him everything and prepare him for it, to raise, so to speak, a worthy replacement." Amanda sympathized. "Thank you, Camilla, and for everything. If it wasn't for you, I don't know how my fate would have turned out. You helped me get back on my feet at the most difficult time of my life. Before I even knew Alex was your grandson. Just like that, like a human being. And that's worth a lot. Kevin turned out to be a wonderful husband and father. And Amanda didn't regret just going with him then, trusting him with her life. He wasn't at all like Miles, the fun-loving, blabbermouth type. Kevin was a man of few words, sometimes even silent, but he proved his love every day by his deeds. For Amanda, the simple things were much more valuable. Are you dressed warmly, or Alex? Eat your soup, or you'll ruin your stomach. I've been worried about you since you were a kid. Or, didn't you sleep well today? Are you ill by any chance? Anything bothering you? Without asking, he could just give Amanda a pair of gold earrings or take everyone to the skating rink. Alex taught her the right and necessary things. That you should respect your mom, love her, be a man, don't let her cry and carry heavy things, and always keep her safe. And this quiet family happiness was much more important to Amanda than popularity and public appearances. It had been a year. Amanda had long ago got into the role of a wife, always waited for Kevin from work, tried to cook something tasty. The whole family, including Jasper, had just returned from a wonderful trip to the sea a week ago. The man resisted to the last, didn't want to go. What's in it for me, a wheelchair user? But Amanda and Camila were adamant. They really wanted Jasper to see the sea again, to bask in the sun, to feel the charms of holiday. Kevin was also in favor of the idea. The men had been friends for a long time, when Miles had been alive, and were close friends. The journey, of course, had been hard on Jasper. He was tired, in pain. But when he was brought to the coast, and for the first time in many years he breathed in the sea breeze, heard the sound of the surf, and saw how beautifully the waves rolled one on another, he realized that these difficulties were nothing compared to the indescribable beauty. All the days the man enjoyed his holidays to the fullest. With the help of special inflatable sleeves and a mattress, he stayed perfectly on the water, swam and enjoyed these inexpressible sensations. There is nothing to say about Alex. It was almost impossible to get him out of the sea. Kevin gave him a mask and fins. Now the young scuba diver was hunting crabs and shells underwater. The boy was absolutely delighted with the sea. He dreamed of it so much, drew pictures of it. And Camila finally got away from everything and relaxed completely. It was vital for her. When the whole family was distributed to their cottages in the late evening after dinner, and Alex was sleeping soundly with his grandparents, it was time for the brisam. Amanda and Kevin wandered along the seafront until dawn, listened to live music, drank sweet Crimean wine, and could not break the embrace. And then they would go to the sea and swim. It was so amazing to swim at night when there was no one around, and then to love each other as passionately as on the first night of their acquaintance. In general, everyone had a great holiday and experienced the best emotions. Upon arrival, normal everyday life began, and everything went on as usual. A month later, Amanda felt the familiar symptoms: nausea, nervousness, and heaviness in the lower abdomen. She already knew the answer, without any doctors or tests. She was pregnant. She and Kevin had somehow never broached the subject. The man hadn't pressured her, hadn't asked her to have his baby, had raised Alex and seemed content with everything. The woman panicked a little. How would he take this news? Would he be ready for fatherhood? Would he love Alex as much as he did now? Amanda decided to consult Camila. She didn't have anyone closer to her, so she rushed straight to her office. She was happy to see Amanda, of course, but she was surprised she'd come to work. Something important had happened. Then, the women sat down in the office. The secretary brought them coffee, and Camila asked head-on, "What happened? You're not wearing your face. Tell it like it is. We'll figure something out together." Amanda frantically blurted out, "Camila, I'm pregnant. What am I going to do? I'm so scared. What if Alex loves me less afterwards? And anyway, how do I tell him?" The woman leaned back in her chair, took off her glasses, and laughed heartily. "Well, you've got to be kidding me. I thought something had happened. Congratulations. It's wonderful. Every man wants a child from his wife. But why are you getting yourself worked up? Why are you making up all these scary stories?" Amanda babbled. "But he's never talked about it at all. Never even mentioned having kids. What if he doesn't want it? I'm so afraid of losing someone I love again, like I did with Miles, you know." Camilla only waved her hand. "You were both young, foolish then. Things are different now. Kevin is just different. He keeps all his emotions inside. But that doesn't mean he doesn't want kids. It's just that he's patient, tactful, doesn't push you and waits for it to happen on its own. And he won't fall out of love with Alex. Don't worry now. Call him and tell him I'm waiting, 'cause I know you. You're going to spend the next couple of months torturing yourself and me too." Amanda pulled out her phone and dialed Kevin's number. He answered anxiously. "Hey, what's up?" You've never called me at work before. Is Alex sick?" Amanda was completely confused. But Camila showed her fist and she made up her mind. "Kevin, I'm pregnant. We're having a baby." There was silence on the phone, and then he answered just as calmly. "Great, here's the deal. On Tuesday I'll make an appointment for you with a good doctor, and you'll be registered. No worries, no worries. And don't go to the gym or go on any of your crazy diets. Just eat what you want. We'll talk it over tonight." Amanda exhaled and almost cried. "Camila, why didn't he say he was happy? That he was glad? Miles was so different." Camila replied, "We don't make a big deal of it. It doesn't matter. Yes, he's not jumping up and down with happiness, but he's already thinking ahead about how to keep you safe. He's a real man and the head of the family. You can't find a man like that these days, and you're getting yourself all worked up. I think Alex will be happy to have a little brother or sister. Jasper and I are going to have another grandchild too, you know that. All right, silly girl, run home and get your dinner ready. Make the family happy. Such an occasion. I'm going to make Jasper happy tonight too, can I?" Amanda picked Alex up from daycare and they baked a cake for Daddy. The anticipation was unbearable. Finally, the front door opened and her favorite walked into the flat. He was holding a huge bouquet of flowers and presented them to Amanda with the words, "Today is the best day of my life. Thank you, sweetheart. Now our family will be even bigger and stronger." And then tossed a joyful Alex up in the air, as always, and told him, "Did you know you're going to have a brother or sister soon? You're very lucky you're going to be the eldest, and therefore in charge. Isn't that great?" Alex thought, serious as always, and then answered, "Just dibs. Let him listen to me and don't break my toys, okay?" Everyone laughed and kissed the baby, and Kevin replied just as seriously, "Deal all right. Let's go to dinner. Who's going to wash their hands first?" And they raced like little children to the bathroom, while Amanda looked at them adoringly and was the happiest wife and mother at that moment. Pitiful technician's daughter. You'll never get out of the mud, laughed her classmates. And 15 years later, Carolina sat at the railway station on her day off and looked hopefully at the people passing by her. On a small table in front of the girl were laid out a variety of papier-mâché figures, very skillful, and hand-colored with acrylic paints, small animals, birds, scenes from children's fairy tales. All this regularly attracted the attention of potential buyers. Except that, having learnt the price, they immediately turned away sullenly with the words, "Why is it so expensive? My Thomas can make such nonsense in a couple of minutes and paint it even faster. What's all this money for?" Caroline only pressed her lips together in embarrassment. She was asking for nothing. But the inhabitants of their provincial town, who were used to saving money on almost everything, did not want to pay for the labor of her invalid father, even if she was also thrown into the mud every time. "What kind of an exclusive you have that you ask so much?" Caroline tried to sell figurines at the railway station in the hope that some of the capital's tourists would be able to appreciate these creations, but she was quickly kicked out. She was told to pay a percentage or get out. Carolina wouldn't have minded paying for her workplace, but the amount the racketeers told her was a mockery 10,000 a day. "Where am I going to get that kind of money?" she asked the big man in the tracksuit, who was not shy of smoking a stinking cigarette in front of her. "In a month, God willing, I'll be able to earn at least half of that." The burly man exhaled the acrid smoke into the girl's face with relish, then smiled wryly. "Well, it's what you wanted, baby. This is big business, by the way. If you want, you can always pay for the place in kind." The man gave the girl a steely stare that made Caroline want to wash herself at once. "Don't," she muttered grimly, lowering her gaze. "I'll pack everything up and go now, then." The bully hummed disappointedly. Caroline shook her head negatively. We could make a deal." The creep held out his big tobacco-smelling hand to Caroline. However, the girl staggered sharply to the side, warningly. "I'm going to scream or call the police for help. Just try to touch me." The jock lowered his hand, and for a second it hovered in the air a centimeter from her face. Then he grinned and said playfully, "And you're not stupid at all, and you're beautiful. You shouldn't want to join our company. You should buy yourself some clothes. You walk around like a bum in your last rags." "I don't mess with bandits," the girl answered him in a serious tone and began to put her rustic luggage into a small sports bag given to her by her father. She was about to leave the platform when the bandit suddenly blocked her way with his massive torso. He looked down at her like she was a bug and smiled nastily at her. "Let me through," the girl mumbled without looking at him. The boogeyman in reply bent closer to her and in a low voice said threateningly, "You think properly, Caroline," he exhaled along with another puff of smoke her name. "You'd be better off with me, and it's in your best interest. You're almost out of high school. Where do you go from here? Do you know the connections I have in this town? If I say the word, no one will hire you. Not even as a cleaner. So you won't be able to continue your mum's career. I'll take care of that." "There's already someone to take care of me," replied the girl, boldly looking the scoundrel in the eye. "I said I won't come here again, let me pass. Or I'll really call the police now." "Is this about your daddy?" Or what? The man grinned and gave a bullhorn with the toe of his trainers. "He won't help you, if anything. And the police here think they all work for me." The thug looked around and added briefly, "Anyway, I've told you everything. Don't you say anything to him, and don't you pawn me off." Carolina, who turned 17 earlier this year, did look a little older than her age trim thanks to daily jogging and her technician mother's help cleaning the shops. And at the same time, slim as a graceful rose, she was admired by almost all the boys at school. However, because of the low social status of her family, no one, except for such criminals as this big guy was he himself looked no more than 20, did not consider the girl as a love interest. Caroline herself never looked for romantic adventures and devoted all her free time exclusively to helping her parents. But even if this scoundrel had suddenly turned out to be the last man on earth, she would never have agreed to be his date. The girl saw a couple of times, as near the only nightclub in their town, gangsters like him left in the arms of young, disappointed, dressed in short skirts. Caroline didn't have to guess who they were. She was old enough to realize how complicated real life was. But even in her worst dream, the girl couldn't imagine such a shameful future awaiting her. "I'll give you a sweet life in this little town. Don't doubt it," said the scoundrel. Standing before this unpleasant force, Caroline began to feel herself slowly but surely overcome by fear. After all, she was all alone in the station, and there was no one to protect her. Fortunately, at that moment, the villain's mobile phone rang, and Caroline, taking advantage of the fact that he was distracted, hurriedly slipped out of the bandit's sight. She returned home that day depressed and penniless. It was the last Sunday in May, which meant that she had the longest and most horrible week before graduation ahead of her. All her classmates would only talk about who and what dress to wear, and what hairstyle and manicure to choose for this important holiday. And guys will try as soon as possible to invite the prettiest girls of the school to the ball. And only Caroline, of course, no one will be invited to spend time at the last school party in her life. Nor will she have any dress, shoes, or manicure. "Honey, are you okay, Jennifer?" the girl's mother inquired cautiously. "You're all pale today. Didn't manage to sell anything at all." Caroline covered her eyes with her hands, unable to hold back the tears that were about to spill. "My girl, what's wrong? Has someone hurt you?" the woman asked again, clasping her crying daughter to her side. "I don't want to go to this stupid prom," Caroline finally managed to utter, trying to control her sobs. Jennifer stroked her daughter's soft, dark blonde, shiny hair and looked into her lovely golden brown eyes. "Honey, but prom is one of the most important days in any girl's life, isn't it? Are you sure you want to miss such an important event? There won't be a second time like this in your life," her mother warned her. Caroline only sobbed a couple of times, then sat down on the bed and began to wipe her eyes thoroughly with a handkerchief. "And it's a good thing it won't," she said. "What haven't I seen at this feast of female vanity? The guests will all do nothing but show off their expensive dresses to each other and drink cheap red wine, while the class teacher and the principal discuss the biggest gossip of the year in a corner of the gym." Jennifer smiled at her daughter, but Caroline saw a slight sadness in that smile. "Are you really that worried about not having anything to wear?" she asked affectionately. "I've already put some money aside for you for a dress. And the shoes, you can have my shoes. Do you remember the loafers like that? I married your father in them." Her mother's eyes clouded with unpleasant memories. Sometimes Caroline marveled at how much her parents loved each other, even though they had lived together for many years and endured hardships. Jennifer had come to this town from a remote village where she had been raised by her grandmother until she came of age. Unfortunately, Jennifer was never able to enroll in any educational institution to continue her studies. The knowledge she received in the village was barely enough to keep her from starving. The young girl was offered only low-skilled work as a cleaner, or, even worse, openly obscene offers. In order to get a foothold in this place and make ends meet, Caroline's mother got a job as a floor cleaner in the office of a taxi company near the station. It was there that she met Michael, her future husband. Michael had been working as a taxi driver for several years and was earning quite well. He was immediately attracted to a modest, pretty cleaner who came to their town from the province. Her purity and openness touched the heart of the man, so that soon the taxi driver invited the girl to the first date, after which he and Jennifer began to officially meet. About a year later, the couple planned a wedding, after which the young people happily lived in marriage for almost 10 years. During this time, they had Caroline, a charming daughter, the name Jennifer gave because of her great love for the flower of the same name. All this time, the woman continued to work in a taxi park, and her husband to drive the residents to the suburbs. The salary received by Jennifer was not large, but thanks to Michael, their small family steadfastly kept afloat, being able, though not lavish, but to buy everything necessary for life. The year that little Caroline turned 11, however, disaster came knocking. Michael was driving an elderly couple from the village back to the city. The weather that autumn was very wet, and it was raining constantly. Because of this, the driver had to be doubly attentive on the wet road, making sure that he could fit into the next corner or brake in time at the traffic lights. The elderly people Michael was driving, as it turned out, were very unrestrained and overly emotional. The elderly people Michael was driving were, as luck would have it, very unrestrained and overly emotional. They were constantly dissatisfied with something and threatened to write a complaint against the taxi driver. Because of this, Caroline's father now and then distracted from the road, trying to pacify the nagging couple. At one of these sensitive moments, the man missed a warning sign and, unable to control himself, smashed through an iron fence, sending him and his passengers into a ditch. The car flipped several times on the steep slope before stopping its fateful course. As luck would have it, the elderly couple were virtually unhurt, with only a few scratches, while Michael's life hung in the balance. His right arm was damaged so badly that the man risked dying at any moment due to heavy blood loss. Doctors miraculously managed to save his life, but the mutilated arm, alas, had to be amputated. When the taxi driver regained consciousness, he could not believe what had happened for a long time. How could it be? He was the breadwinner of the family. What would happen to his wife and daughter? Jennifer managed with great difficulty to calm him down and assure him that life goes on. No matter what happened, they would always be together. And she would do whatever was necessary to get them through these hard times. Since then, Caroline's mother has had to work 3 times as hard, taking extra shifts at the city hospital as well as at her daughter's school. Although Michael fell into a brief apathy at first, soon enough he was able to pull himself together. After all, with one arm or two, he continued to be the head of the family and could not allow himself to be completely supported by his wife and daughter. Caroline was by then already actively helping her mother. The man began to develop his left arm and look for ways to earn an alternative income. Naturally, working in a taxi was out of the question. After another 6 months, he mastered the art of creating papier-mâché figurines and weaving baskets from vines, for which he traveled to the nearest forest, where he collected suitable wood. Persistent and strong-minded, Michael was ready to sell the fruits of his labor himself. But to this occupation, all the local men who personally knew Caroline's father treated not so much with contempt, but rather with a slight sneer. They said that he had been a normal man, driving people around, and now he had stooped to selling baskets in the street. Then Caroline offered her father to sit instead of him on a busy shopping street of the town with his daughter. "Is it enough for you to walk the corridors to class with your mother?" she asked. The father refused at first out of pride. "It's not good enough for you. I understand how your classmates look at you because of that," he said. Caroline was embarrassed, but tried to brush it off. "To hell with them," the girl answered him, smiling. "I'm not doing this to amuse them, but because we need the money. You spend a lot of time on this weaving and figurines, and women are much more willing to buy such things. What about your studies?" Her father looked at her doubtfully. "What about my studies? Studying won't run away," Caroline answered him simply. "I will trade at weekends, and first I will try the squares, or the markets, then I'll go to the railway station. A lot of people pass by there during the day. Maybe we'll make some money." Michael furtively brushed a large tear from the corner of his eye. He thanked God every day for giving him such a beautiful, understanding, and supportive family. He could hardly have dreamed of anything more in his life, except that it was a little hard without a hand. "All right," he agreed, "but only after work, straight home. I don't want you to fall behind in your classes because of this." "Don't worry," laughed back her daughter. "I learn new material quickly. As my teachers tell me, everything will be fine." Caroline shook her father's hand encouragingly and thought about how much she loved her family. For the sake of these people, she was ready to endure any difficulties, as long as they were healthy, fed, and had the opportunity to meet each new day with joy. Michael not unreasonably worried about the attitude of classmates to his daughter. No matter how friendly Caroline tried to behave with them, the school community flatly refused to accept her. Although the girl turned out to be the most attractive, not at all awkward in the class, and regularly received only excellent grades in physical education, other, more successful classmates only did that sought to tease Caroline at every opportunity. "What, Carolina? Are you preparing for your after-school program again?" Vanessa, the first beauty of the class, mocked her in the locker room. "Let me guess. Do you have an extra class today to carry buckets of water or not?" "Oh wait, must be obstacle course practice. You're jumping up and down the stairs with a mop?" Vanessa was laughing a hysterical, unpleasant laugh. Caroline had to restrain herself from saying something equally caustic and unflattering. The girl tried to avoid school fights, but it did not mean that she was ready to tolerate such an attitude to herself until the end of her senior year. "Vanessa, you'd better finish taking your weight loss supplements," she said calmly, tying her old trainers. The classmates' laughter broke off abruptly. "I'm serious. It's already melted your brains. You're laughing like a lunatic." Vanessa's face instantly contorted into a grimace of anger and disgust. Caroline realized she'd guessed right. Vanessa had been frantically trying to lose weight for the past few months to fit into the designer dress her parents had promised her for the prom. The only problem was that the size range of such outfits ended exclusively at size 42. "You little brat, you filthy little brat. You'll never get married with such a horrible pedigree. So you're wasting your time training and running 5 kilometers a day." The girl was ready to run even 10 kilometers. She spat out in anger. "The most you can be in this town is an elite call girl. And that's if you don't despise sleeping with a girl who's been mudding like a pig since high school." Vanessa threw with all her might at Caroline a dirty rag that the cleaning lady had left in the locker room so she wouldn't have to go far to get a change of clothes. The piece of cloth fell on Carolina's head with a loud smack, and all the girls in the room burst out laughing. "Serves her right, you upstart. Show her where she belongs, will you?" Vanessa was taunted by her friends. "You think you can open your filthy mouth here?" Caroline was shaking like a fever. She had never felt such hatred from others. More than anything else in the world, she wanted to disappear, to dissolve like vapor from water on a hot surface. She didn't realize how she had shouted in her heart to all those puffed-up puppets. "Choke on your anger. All you know is to wash the bones of blokes, don't you? You have no interests in each other's lives except money and rags. I hate you all, you puffed-up pussies." Caroline didn't realize how she had jumped out of the changing room. The girl rushed past all the other students and ran down the corridor right into the street. Once she was in the school stadium, she heard a chant. "Caroline. Class hadn't started yet. Where are you going?" Harry, the gym teacher, shouted after her. But the girl didn't listen to him. She ran 5 laps in a row before her heart was able to beat again. Caroline didn't know where she got her ability to run, but she was sure that everything in life is given to a person for a reason. And if she had the opportunity to develop this ability, then she should use it, especially since running was the only thing that helped her calm down and bring her chaotic thoughts into relative order. Trying to regain her breath, Caroline approached her classroom. The boys, lined up in a row and unaware of what had recently happened in the girls' locker room, looked at their classmate with surprise, and some with outright envy. "Watch and learn." The gym teacher waved his hand in Carolina's direction. 3 kilometers in 10 minutes. "And your shoes are ready to be included in the Olympic team. Not like you idiots. To the left, go, 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 go." There was a loud whistle, and Carolina's classmates, with dejected faces, ran their standard 6 laps. "Well done, Caroline." Harry patted her on the shoulder. "Take a rest, bye. It's the first time I've seen results like yours in 5 years. A real talent." The gym teacher shook his head and went off to follow the older students, while Caroline sat on the sports bench and pondered his words. Sure, it was a little late for her to start a sports career, but could her running talents be applied in a more productive way? The answer to this question the girl has not yet found for herself, precisely because of the incident in the locker room, and also because of a series of regular petty bullying from other girls. Caroline did not want to go to the prom. However, Jennifer still managed to persuade her daughter not to miss such a momentous event. After all, it's better to take your diploma from them right away, so that you don't have to go there again, the understanding mother winked. But you must never show them that you are scared. And if you don't come to the graduation, that's exactly what you'll show them. Let's not give them something to gossip about. Okay, Caroline sighed heavily, but agreed. Okay, let this be my last fight. Jennifer helped to choose and buy for her daughter the most beautiful dress they could find in an inexpensive second-hand shop, a simple cut, but at the same time very elegant and refined dress in the shade of sapphire, which perfectly emphasized Caroline's slender, athletic figure and perfectly set off the noble and yet completely natural color of her hair. The wedding shoes, which Jennifer lent to her daughter, perfectly matched the outfit and Caroline's high hairstyle, which she had also made herself. "It's a pity I don't have any jewelry at all," Jennifer complained, looking sadly at the girl's festive look. "Why not?" Michael suddenly joined the gathering and grinned slyly at his favorite women. "Dad, are you what?" Caroline looked at him uncertainly, and in her eyes Michael read anxiety and worry. "Don't tell me you bought something for me." It ended sadly, Caroline said with a smile. "I did." Her father nodded with a smile and pulled a small velvet box out of his shirt pocket. Caroline was incredibly embarrassed. Not only had her mother bought her a dress that was simply magical by the girl's standards, but her father had managed to throw away a considerable amount of money for her. "Why?" Caroline asked him guiltily. But Michael had already reached out to her and put a box in her hand. "It's a little miracle." "Open it," he said. Caroline opened the lid with a sinking heart. On a white velvet cushion lay a tiny gold pendant in the shape of a star. The five-pointed beauty shone proudly with its rays, even though it was no bigger than a fingernail on Caroline's index finger. Each ray of the star ended in a tiny shining crystal, and when the light fell on the stones, they lit up a myriad of colored lights. "Oh my God, it's beautiful." Mother and daughter exhaled almost simultaneously. Michael smiled and said to the girl, "Caroline, I want you to know that you, for me, will always be a guiding star that will not let me go astray from the right course. You and Mum are my two brightest stars." With these words, the man hugged first his wife with one arm and then his daughter, who clung to her father's strong and reliable shoulder. "Thank you, Daddy," Caroline said through tears of gratitude. "I will never take it off. I will always wear it as a talisman." Michael agreed with his daughter that he would pick her up from school in the evening after the party was over. It got dark early in their neighborhood, and teenagers, when they're drunk, are a mess. You never know what to expect from them. So her father decided to insure the girl in case the drunken classmates suddenly wanted to afford too much. When Caroline entered the assembly hall, where the event was held, many of her classmates quieted down, not immediately recognizing the girl. She looked around, deciding where she could best sit so as not to draw too much attention to herself. When Vanessa suddenly appeared on the horizon, like a shark's fin in the middle of a calm ocean. The queen never walks alone. For some reason, Caroline thought at that moment the first beauty of the class was accompanied by her own entourage, consisting of 3 girls and 2 guys. And the whole company was heading straight for her. Caroline noted to herself that Vanessa didn't wear the desired dress from a famous designer. Apparently, she couldn't fit herself to the notorious beauty standards of the famous brand. Instead, Vanessa wore a perfectly tight, extremely short leather dress, whose coloring was somewhere in the middle between a flesh tone and the color of bronze powder. Good thing it doesn't blend in completely, Caroline thought. Otherwise, you'd think she'd come completely unclothed. "Well, here's our Cinderella," Vanessa said, stretching her vowels. "Cute dress. Did you get it secondhand? It's okay. It's okay. You can wear it once, and then it'll be handy for scrubbing floors." Caroline gritted her teeth to keep from telling her what she thought of her provocative outfit. At that moment, Vanessa noticed the gold pendant around her neck. How lovely. The classmate's eyes flashed, and she reached out her hand to touch the jewel. "Don't touch it," Caroline sharply brushed her fingers away. "It's a present from Daddy," she said with a caustic grin. "It hurts." Vanessa replied with a scornful arch of her eyebrow. "It's just a cheap thing you bought on sale anyway." "If I asked, my parents would give me a dozen of them," Vanessa said. She turned and led the other boys, who followed reluctantly after their leader. Caroline chuckled softly. It seemed that Vanessa's superiority was beginning to bore even her most devoted fans. After the graduation ceremony, the real disco began. Under the influence of good mood, invigorating music and hot drinks, everyone danced. As they say, who can do what they like? Caroline did not dance. She wanted to leave immediately after receiving her papers. But the headmistress asked her to stay and be with the guys a little longer, because it was the last time we were all together. Although Caroline was not particularly eager to continue the evening, she gave in to the headmistress' request. When the slow dance sounded, the hall was illuminated with soft and languid light. The girl saw someone approaching her. The figure emerging from the pink smoke was Andrew, Vanessa's boyfriend. "Hi, Caroline," Andrew began, smiling languidly. "You look really good tonight." Can I ask you to dance?" Caroline was embarrassed. She realized that something was wrong. Why would Vanessa's boyfriend ask her to slow dance? "Wouldn't your lover be angry?" She tried to joke. She couldn't believe that the most handsome guy in the school wanted to dance with her. A slight shadow ran across the guy's face. "No, she won't. I'm sick of her," he rolled his eyes. "All I hear every day is, 'Andrew, am I pretty, Andrew? Am I pretty, Andrew? Have I lost weight?' The scales don't seem to be reading right," and so on and so forth. It became impossible to communicate with her. Caroline held back a laugh. No one had ever portrayed Vanessa so vividly and seemingly. "Yes, she's very fond of herself," the girl nodded. "Okay, but just one dance. I have to go home soon." "If you say so, beautiful lady." Andrew smiled and, making an elegant gesture, offered his hand to the girl. Caroline danced a slow dance for the first time in her life. It was an amazing, unlike anything she had ever felt before. It was as if a whole swarm of small colored hummingbirds had been released inside her, and the tiny birds were flying all over her body, giving every movement of the girl a truly airy lightness. Andrew looked at her so intently, as if he really wondered what Caroline was like. What kind of person was she? What is she like? Immersed in her romantic thoughts, Caroline did not immediately notice a figure with a touch of bronze powder flashed behind her. "Get out of here," Vanessa hissed. Caroline had no time to react when Andrew's strong hands grabbed her by the shoulders and turned her around to face her rich classmate. In the next second, Vanessa spewed a huge amount of tomato juice from a paper bag at her with all her might. Caroline gasped at the nasty, brackish taste. The first minute she was afraid that she had poured real pig's blood on her, like in a popular horror film. "Drink, drink, you cesspit," Vanessa said, pouring juice all over the unfortunate classmate. "You miserable fool. What are you doing? Did you really believe Andrew just wanted to dance with you? You thought he liked you?" Vanessa tilted her head and started laughing like a lunatic. The smoke and the light made it look like Caroline had been doused with something black like tar. Stop it, Vanessa, you're crazy," Caroline shouted back at her, trying to get out of Andrew's grasp. He released her, and she began to shake off the sticky, salty liquid. Her dress was hopelessly ruined, as was her hair. And what was most tragic of all, her mom's wedding shoes. "God, how can you be such a monster, Vanessa?" Caroline asked her in despair. "Why do you hate me so much?" Vanessa condescended to answer, smiling with all her 32 teeth. "It's a joy to hate you. I despise you, Caroline, because people like you are always trying to get out of your dirty hole, like mice waiting for someone to deliver cheese for them outside." "You should know your place and keep your head down," Vanessa said. "What do you think? I didn't see you flashing your legs at our boys in gym class." "What, Caroline?" From the shock, Caroline struggled to speak. "Vanessa, come on. I'm just a good runner. And it's nobody's fault that you can't stop eating fries in packs." Apparently, that last remark had finally pissed Vanessa off, and all the anger and meanness that had been in her until that moment came out. She took a swing at her classmate. Vanessa sharply lowered her perfectly manicured hand and grabbed the chain around Caroline's neck and pulled off the pendant Michael had given her. "Did you think you could be better than me?" Vanessa whispered, clutching Caroline's gold star in her fist. "But I have money and social standing, and all you have is your filthy rag, which you will use every day for the rest of your life to mop the floors of this school or some rundown hospital on the outskirts of town." Caroline lunged for the wretch, but Andrew grabbed her arms, preventing her from resisting Vanessa. Give it back now," the girl shouted tearfully. "You have no right to even touch him. You're the most disgusting person I've ever known. Give me the pendant back." Vanessa held the pendant up to Caroline's face, knowing full well that she couldn't take it away from her. Then she released the chain from her fingers, and the little star swung in front of her nose like a hypnotist's pendulum. "You're a pathetic cleaning lady's daughter, and you'll never get close to being a normal person," Vanessa said in a thick, low voice. "Repeat after me. I know my place, Vanessa, and I'm the pathetic daughter of a maintenance worker." "Go to hell," Vanessa, Caroline said, glaring hatefully at the blonde in the leather dress. The resentment swept over her head, preventing her from snapping out of the feeling of all-consuming anger. "Do it again, or you'll never see your jewel again," Vanessa whispered again. She wanted to throw the pendant on the floor to crush it with the heel of her lacquered shoes. But at that moment the general light flashed brightly, and the teenagers saw Megan's headmistress looking at them with all the sternness she was capable of. "What the hell is going on here, Vanessa?" she asked the rich alumna angrily. Then she glared menacingly at Andrew, who instantly released Caroline. The girl didn't hold back her feelings and slapped the henchman with an impressive slap. "You filthy henchman," Caroline said through gritted teeth. Then she held out her open palm to Vanessa. "Give it back. What you took now." "Vanessa." The headmistress looked at her reproachfully. Vanessa put the pendant back into Caroline's palm, being careful not to touch her, after defiantly wiping her hands on her dress. "Megan, can I go home?" Shaking with humiliation and resentment, Caroline asked her. "My dad is probably waiting for me outside." She realized that at that moment she had become an absolute laughingstock in front of all the students and teachers at her school. Megan looked at the girl with genuine regret and said briefly, "Of course, dear, go. Have a happy life after school," she added belatedly. But Caroline was already closing the doors to the assembly hall behind her, and at the same time to this horrible part of her now definitive past. After graduation, Carolina had been in a terrible state. For almost a month, not wanting to go out, she hadn't discussed what had happened with her parents. When Michael met her at the school and saw in what moral and physical state is his daughter, the man was ready to tear and throw. "Daughter, just tell me, who are the bastards who did this to you? They're your classmates, right?" "What difference does it make?" Caroline waved it off. "Forget it, Dad. It was just some fools playing a joke on me like that. Luckily, I don't have to hang out with any of them anymore. I can't even see this school. Let's go home." The distraught father calmed his daughter down as best he could, but he returned home feeling quite upset. His sacred duty was to protect his daughter's own blood. And now this. And Caroline, a light-hearted person, flatly refused to reveal the names of the villains. Michael could not, with all his will, break into the school and shake this information out of the teachers. Jennifer reassured her husband, saying that if her daughter didn't want to talk about it, then there was no need to get involved, so she had to deal with it on her own. Besides, she assured her husband, "Caroline always knows that we are close by, and we will always help her with everything she needs. Our daughter is very strong. If she needs our help, you and I will know about it, believe me." Caroline, meanwhile, was lying on her bed, clutching the tattered chain of her pendant in her hand. It wasn't even the dress or the nasty words Vanessa had said that hurt the most. Most of all, Caroline was tormented by anger for the spoiled gift of her father. She realized that the chain could be repaired, but she didn't want to burden her parents with it, telling them that she had just taken the pendant off and put it back to her. Caroline contemplated her future. Now that the hated school was over, the girl could for the first time consciously choose what to do with her life next. She realized that she had no prospects in this city. But to enter a good university in the capital also required a lot of money. And where to get it from? A regular part-time job. From the backwoods. And Caroline couldn't just leave her parents like that. They needed help, including material aid. The girl listed in her mind what she could do best. But alas, the list wasn't that long. Running, cooking, and the ability to wax floors to a shine. God, Caroline thought, was Vanessa right after all. And I'm not going to get anywhere in this life with these opportunities. Bitter tears ran down her cheeks. It turned out that her classmate, without knowing it, had predicted her future. But Carolina was not one of those who let circumstances overrule her so easily. Therefore, the girl decided to do the following. She wanted to work all next year to save a sufficient amount of money. After that, the girl intended to go to try her luck in a large regional metropolis. There she wanted to take a course in her profession, and maybe, after passing it, find a good job with a decent salary in the center. Caroline realized that it would be a difficult path, but she was ready to endure everything to change her life, thus getting rid of Vanessa's humiliating prediction. Having told her parents about her plans, Caroline sighed with relief. They were not against the girl to try to find a decent job. Michael and his wife were very happy that their daughter finally began to come out of that terrible state. "I will continue to help Mom and Dad," promised Caroline. "But I have to think about my own destiny. I want you to be proud of me, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to achieve my dream." A couple of days later, Caroline took her CV to a recruitment agency. She offered her services as a maid and, if required, she could also act as a cook, preparing simple meals. To her surprise, the call came quite quickly after that. In just a week, the girl was already sitting in front of a female employee recruiting domestic staff for wealthy homes. The woman scrutinized her profile and then looked at Caroline intently in the eyes. "What about your stress tolerance? Can you handle unusual situations normally?" The girl was somewhat taken aback. It was the first time she had ever been asked such a question, but she answered nonetheless. "Depends on what you mean by the word unconventional." The recruiter raised an eyebrow that was perfectly fine, like a thread, and began to curl her fingers. "Well, for example, if you are suddenly insulted without reason, from your point of view, raise your voice at you, or, on the contrary, show you special attention, maybe even with elements of a slight flirtation." Caroline gasped in amazement. "Excuse me, do you want to employ me as a maid or, with all due respect, sell me to a not very decent establishment?" The girl realized that after such words she would probably never get a job. But she couldn't help herself. Whatever it was, she wouldn't let anyone humiliate her again. Never. The employee nodded her head briefly and made a note in her notebook. She then raised her eyes to Caroline again. "Well, you answer more or less politely. And your reaction is quite adequate. I will report these points to my superiors so that they can make a final decision. You see, you've had 3 maids leave this place before you, and every one of them felt obliged to tell me in color that they were not warned about how bad it was going to be." "Is that a warning?" I asked Caroline, just in case. "Consider it a warning," the personnel officer nodded. "Expect to be contacted within 3 days. If you are contacted within that time, you are accepted. You will learn the rest of the details of your job on the spot. And yes, I almost forgot. You will be required to live on the employer's premises for the duration of the contract." Caroline nodded in agreement. It was all very strange, but all the more exciting. She really wanted to be hired for this position. The salary was more than generous. There would be something to help her parents. And even if these unusual situations arose in the course of business, she would not give herself an offense. 2 days later, Caroline's mobile phone rang happily, informing the girl that she had been accepted as a maid in the house of a rich businessman. "Mom, Dad, hurrah. I have a job now," Caroline happily announced to her parents. "They said they would pick me up in 4 hours." "I'm going to go pack," Caroline said. Jennifer breathed a sigh of relief and crossed herself. Her husband gently hugged her with the arm that had survived the accident, and the girl's mother slowly lowered her head onto her husband's shoulder. "Here is our girl going into adulthood," she said slowly. "God, I wish she'd do well there." "Don't worry," Jenny. Michael held her close. "Remember, you told me yourself that our daughter is a very strong person. She'll get through anything. When it was time to leave, it was not without tears. Her parents saw Caroline off with all the tenderness and warmth of their hearts, expecting her to come back next weekend to share her impressions of her new job. Carolina was picked up from her home 9-story building by a huge black business-class UE. When the girl climbed into it, it seemed to her that she was inside a cruise liner, so huge was the space of the car interior. The driver turned out to be a not very talkative middle-aged man who calmly drove her to the desired destination. When she got out of the car, Caroline couldn't believe her eyes. In front of her stood a gigantic 4-story mansion, made in a completely modern style with glass and chrome metal constructions. Caroline thought involuntarily that the owner of this house must be very fond of shopping centers, if he had decided to live in one of them. She didn't voice these thoughts out loud, of course. Instead, she obediently followed the head housekeeper and housekeeper who led her to the pool, instructing the new employee along the way. Try not to make eye contact with Oliver when he asks you something. It's best to lower your gaze and answer in a matter-of-fact manner. If you're cleaning a room and the owner suddenly walks in, you shouldn't fuss or pretend to notice his presence. Just get on with your work. Oliver is used to all the servants moving about and working almost silently. You're part of this house, and in a way you have to blend in with it and everything that goes on here. Often we don't pay attention to the owner's little quirks, the housekeeper continued. We only call the guards if we realize that it could endanger his life and health. Caroline was silent, but she felt as if she were in some modern fairy tale about an enchanted castle where everyone was silent and could not say a word to the cruel king who ruled this high-tech kingdom. The housekeeper's last sentence, however, surprised Caroline somewhat. "Excuse me, I think you said something about quirks. May I clarify what exactly was meant?" The housekeeper stopped and looked at the girl as if she were trying to see through her thoughts with invisible X-rays. "You were not warned by the agency about possible irregularities, were you?" she asked dryly. "Do I understand correctly?" "No, why not? They explained to me that there were some special circumstances, but what were they?" The housekeeper raised her eyebrows elegantly. "Well then, you'll soon see for yourself." The woman led her to a large rectangular pool, on the marble terrace of which sat a young man reclining in a sun lounger. He was wearing large sunglasses, a bright red Hawaiian shirt, and white knee-length shorts. The guy looked to be about 24 to 25 years old. Judging by his relaxed manner and the way he was calmly flipping through the newspaper in his lap, he was the owner's son. Pleased, the housekeeper nodded to him. Caroline arrived exactly 10 minutes ago, as the master had requested. After that, the lady silently left, leaving the girl and the young man alone. "Hello," Caroline greeted him politely. "Excuse me, do you know how long we have to wait for Oliver?" The man froze, holding the newspaper half open, and then looked at the girl in surprise from under the shimmering glasses. "I don't understand," was all he could ask. "Excuse me, but you must be the son of the owner of this house, aren't you?" Caroline answered the question with a question. "I just can't get used to how many rules there are here. I wanted to ask you about them before I met Oliver," she continued. The young man continued to stare at the maid in mute amazement. She, not knowing what to do in such a delicate situation, just stood there staring back at him. Finally, the man couldn't stand it any longer and laughed loudly. Caroline felt incredibly stupid, but still managed to squeeze out a weak smile. "Honestly, I've never had one of those before," he said through his laughter and came close to Caroline. The girl blushed instantly, not knowing if she could back away from him at least a couple of steps. The master's son came so close that Caroline could feel the fabric of his fluttering shirt with her hand. "Caroline, that's your name, isn't it?" he asked with a playful smile. "Did Amanda say it right?" "Yes, that's right." Caroline looked up at him again. Now, Caroline, the owner of the house, is not coming here for the simple reason that he is already standing in front of you. I am Oliver." Caroline stood still with her mouth open in astonishment. Without another word, the young man pushed his glasses back over his eyes and then strode off at a steady pace toward the stairs leading to his private wing. He threw her a final glance without turning round. "I like you, Caroline. You are now definitely accepted. Please tell Amanda and ask her to come and see me when she has a free moment." With these words, he disappeared, leaving Caroline in a half-faint with excitement. Caroline told the housekeeper that the master was waiting for her. She pressed her lips together and showed her into the back room, where she gave her all the necessary clothes and the key to her room. "Remember, we rise at 6, so you won't be seen or heard. And no matter how embarrassed you are, you must continue to do your job. Do you understand?" "Understood," Caroline replied, thoroughly embarrassed. Caroline went to her room to change. Thus began the working day for the girl. She soon realized what Amanda had meant when she spoke of Oliver's quirks. It turned out that he loved to host big costume parties with loud music, beautiful women, and expensive drinks. Besides Caroline herself, there were about 15 other people working in the house, and they all behaved as if they were exactly the same things in the young millionaire's mansion, like some floor vase or a painting hanging on one of the walls. It was, of course, very disconcerting to the girl that all the employees of Oliver's house were acting quietly and inconspicuously. After all, Oliver had clearly made it clear to her that he could socialize with them as ordinary people. Amanda, however, continued to insist on numerous rules of behavior even after her host had summoned her to talk to her. Well, Caroline couldn't cross her either. In the first month of work, she received a substantial advance on her card, part of which she immediately sent to her parents. Oliver remained an inscrutable mystery to her. He could easily walk up and kiss one of the young gardeners he paired with her. They were twin sisters and tended an incredibly beautiful winter garden, but at the same time he never allowed himself any flirtations of a certain kind with her or them. For these purposes, Oliver had far more experienced girls who could safely be called mistresses. One named Molly stood out among them. The long-legged, red-haired beauty spent most of her time with Oliver, and he, in turn, increasingly applied the definition of fiancé to her. The entire staff of the house concluded that soon the young people would be married and their master would have a legitimate wife. However, this eccentric rich man had a completely different side. Very often, especially in the evening, Caroline found the young man immersed in the affairs of his company. He would sit for hours at his desk, and sometimes Caroline was sure he worked all night long. She had never once heard him say a rude word to anyone in the household. And if any of the workers made serious mistakes, Oliver always spoke to them in private, locked away in his office. But his fiancée Molly did not share this peaceful coexistence with the staff. She was always picking on everything, shouting at everyone, and the young maids, including Caroline, tried to bring her to tears. "Why are you talking here during working hours?" she shouted at the girls. "Don't you have anything else to do? Look around: dust, dirt, carpets. You're not sweeping properly. Get back to work, you slackers. Well, when Oliver and I get married, I'll get to work on you. How many of you have Amanda taught you? It's all over the place. What are you looking at me for? Look me in the eye when I'm talking." Molly growled at them like a wild tigress, imagining herself the mistress of the house. The maids held on with all their might, unable to endure her terrifying screams and shrieks. God forbid Oliver should marry that Molly, one of the maids complained to her in the kitchen. "Caroline, then we'd all be ruined." "What can she do to you?" Caroline asked her with a smile. "She's not his wife yet. You're not panicking yet." Millie looked at the girl and said with bitterness in her voice, "You just don't know her, Caroline. This is not a woman. That's jealousy and greed combined. Only in stilettos. She'd run us all to pieces, I'll bet. She's jealous of her master's every plate. The other day she complained to him that we were too pretty to walk round the house and charm him with our slim legs. Beatrice and Caroline laughed together, realizing how absurd the situation was, especially when it came to a man like their master. "I can't lose this job," Beatrice continued sadly. "I have a little son in the village with my mother. I work here and send them money so that Matthew will not need anything." "I understand," Caroline said. "My parents have always lived very modestly in another town, so this place is a real chance for me to make a name for myself." Beatrice looked out the window at the full moon hanging over the horizon and smiled dreamily. "Oliver's very good," she murmured, as if in confidence. "He has his quirks, of course, but he's not as cruel as Amanda says he is. I suspect she's made him look like that to us on purpose, so that we'll work harder and not relax." "He is a little strange," Caroline agreed, and looked away from Beatrice, lest she should read into it the feelings that Caroline felt every time she remembered how close Oliver had been to her. "He is very young, and for the owner of such a huge company, how had he achieved all this?" "He inherited it 3 years ago," Beatrice replied simply. "Since then, he's had these oddities of working non-stop and resting all the time. His father, Marcus, was poisoned at a business dinner. The police were never able to figure out who did it. You could say the culprit is still walking free. And Oliver is very afraid that at any moment he could be next." Really, Caroline was genuinely surprised. "Well, yes," Beatrice nodded. Caroline was struck to the heart. She had never imagined that such a tragedy could have befallen this outwardly light and cheerful person. "I think," Beatrice continued, "that all these parties and phobias, like the fact that he always takes our cook, Kevin, and one of the maids with him when he goes to other cities, are all ways of distancing himself from this personal drama. Oliver, he loved his father so much, he can't seem to get over losing him. And the bastards who sent Marcus to the grave never got what they deserved. I guess it's all hit him too hard," Caroline muttered thoughtfully to herself. "Who would have thought that the rich had more trouble than the common people?" All the next night, Caroline could not sleep for some unknown reason. Everything seemed to be going well, but her mind drifted back and forth to Oliver. "I wish I knew what kind of man he really is. Maybe this bravado is just a mask, someone more vulnerable, someone she could probably help." A couple of weeks later, exactly what Beatrice had told her about happened. Oliver was going on a business trip of great importance to his business, and, as he always did, he took Kevin, his longtime cook, and his maid with him. The latter, to his great amazement, was Caroline herself. "Why are you so surprised?" Oliver asked her with a slight chuckle. "I need someone I can trust 100% to clean my room and control the food I eat during the trip. I don't think it's a big deal." "Yes, but you don't know me at all," Caroline objected. "I haven't been with you that long. What if I can't do it?" The young man's face took on a serious expression, and then he replied in a voice that sent shivers down Caroline's spine. "Well, if you can't do it, then you and I will have to part. Or we can do it right now if you're not sure you're ready for a business trip. Because that's what a business trip is to you." "No, it's not." "Of course I'll go with you," Caroline said with her lips pressed together. How could she be so foolish as to think that this calculating businessman could have a soul? If Beatrice was right about his worries about her father's death, he was either hiding them very well, or her friend was mistaken. Because how could a man who was ready in 2 seconds to fire another man standing in front of him at that very moment be worried? No, Caroline shook her head as she left her boss's office. Oliver could be anything, but he's certainly not a bereaved person in need of comfort. When all the things were packed and Caroline and Kevin were getting into one of the 2 large jeeps, one for her and the cook, and the other for Oliver and his guard, Kevin said to Caroline with a kind smile, "Don't you worry so much, my dear. I've been traveling with the owner for years, and it's always been fine. It's only for a couple of days. There's nothing to worry about." Caroline answered the cook with a calm but somewhat detached smile. She herself was pricked by something inside her. A bad feeling plagued the young maid. Suddenly, looking up at the upper windows of the mansion, she thought she saw a familiar silhouette flicker into Oliver's study, for a tiny fraction of an instant. She even thought she saw someone's fiery red hair through the window. But it couldn't be. Molly had gone to some foreign resort the other day and was not expected to return for another week at the earliest. "It must be your imagination," Caroline said to herself. "You should read less detective stories at night." With these thoughts, the girl got into the car. At first, the road was good, and the way through a dense forest seemed to the girl even picturesque. But gradually, the closer they got to the wide stone bridge, the more potholes were encountered on their way. The driver explained to Caroline that the road had not been repaired for a long time, and therefore they had to be especially careful here. "You don't have to explain to me," she nodded, remembering the tragedy that had happened to her own father. The driver wanted to say something else to Caroline, but suddenly he was attracted by something unusual happening ahead with Oliver's car. His business car, which was considered one of the most reliable in the world, suddenly began to swerve on the road. Every now and then his driver was swerving sideways. "What the hell is going on up there?" was all the driver of the Jeep with the cook and the maid could manage to say. When the car in front of him went over the bridge railing at full speed and fell into the water with a loud splash. "Oliver," was all Caroline could exclaim in despair. But then their car began to do the same kind of pretzels. "What happened?" Kevin asked, horrified, his huge blue eyes now huge. "Are we all going to crash now?" "Don't talk rubbish, Kevin," shouted the driver, trying to hold on to the steering wheel. "I don't understand. I just had a full inspection last week. What the—" He didn't have time to finish, because their Jeep also failed to slow down and went full speed into the river after Oliver's car. Caroline couldn't remember exactly how she'd ended up underwater. It was just a protective reflex, and she opened her eyes, being already a few meters into the deep abyss. The cabin was completely submerged. This she realized at once. Sitting next to her with his eyes wide open was Kevin. Blood was oozing from the wound on his temple. And Caroline realized with bitterness that the poor man had obviously been hit when the car fell. He was dead, and so was the driver, who was almost immediately choked by the powerful torrent of water. Being an excellent swimmer, Caroline had good lung capacity, so she managed to get out of the Jeep quickly enough. The girl looked, trying to find the second car in the murky water. Finally, she saw it. Oliver's car was buried up to its bonnet in the mud, sinking to the bottom of the river. After swimming a few more meters, she saw Oliver's hands floating in the water, which she grabbed and began to pull him upwards, away from the submerged car. With great difficulty, Carolina managed not only to pull her boss up, but also to drag him to the shore, and from there to the nearest road. There, Caroline was able to stop the first car she could find and call an ambulance. Until the medics arrived, the girl gave the victim all the necessary resuscitation measures. She felt Oliver's pulse on the shore, and making sure that he was alive, tried to pump out most of the water from his lungs. Although the man coughed up enough water, he never regained consciousness, so Caroline had to carry him on her back to the nearest motorway. Caroline's own lungs burned like they were on fire. Her legs were shaking. She was sweating and coughing. But she was determined to save Oliver. When the ambulance finally arrived, Caroline described the situation to them, and they realized that there was something wrong and called the police. Caroline and Oliver were taken to the hospital, where they received all the necessary care. As the girl was hardly hurt, she was able to visit Oliver after a few long hours, which seemed like an eternity. The man, who by then had come to his senses, thanked her profusely. "You said you couldn't handle it," he said in a hoarse voice. "You not only managed, but thanks to you I'm still alive. And I can imagine what you had to go through while you dragged me through those woods. I'm sorry, Caroline. I'm ashamed of the way I pointed out your place, Oliver said. Come on, Oliver, Caroline said. The most important thing is that you're breathing. My teachers at school told me I had a talent for running. I'm finally getting the hang of it. If I hadn't run so much, I wouldn't have been able to get you out. Except what? Oliver asked her grimly. Your colleagues, Kevin, Nick, Matthew. They're all dead, Caroline said with a heavy heart. Oliver nodded understandingly. I don't understand what happened at all. The cars were in perfect working order, I'm sure of it. Caroline, Oliver glared at his young savior. Is something troubling you? Are you ill? Should I call a doctor? No, Oliver stopped her. No, it's not that. The young man reached into his jacket, which was hanging on the chair, and pulled a thick notebook out of the pocket, followed by a pre-prepared pen, straight from the cover. He wrote something on the tiny piece of paper, and tearing it off, handed it to Caroline. Now you are the only one I can trust. Caroline, not understanding anything, took the slip of paper from his hands. There were some numbers written on it, and the girl counted as many as 10 of them. But what are these? She asked. It's a code. Don't worry, it's not for the safe, Oliver joked. It's just from my work laptop. The computer is in my office, and I have an unusual favor to ask of you. Please, it will help me understand and solve a lot of things. Caroline nodded, and after listening to her superior's request, she drove back home. Meanwhile, an investigator came to Oliver's room. The policeman interviewed the victim and assured him that they would do everything possible to find the intruders as soon as possible. Intruders, Oliver couldn't believe his ears, so it wasn't an accident. I'm afraid not, the policeman shook his head. We have brought the cars to the surface, and judging by the preliminary examination, I have no consolation for you. Someone deliberately cut your brake hose, knowing that you would be traveling in very difficult road conditions, the policeman said. Oliver slowly leaned back on the pillow. Well, they got to me, too, he breathed out heavily. Your father's competitors, the policeman said. I'm sorry, but I've heard about this case. As far as I understand it, they never found who was responsible for Marcus's death. Oliver nodded briefly. I think it's the same people, he said weakly, feeling the familiar fear that the young man had been so successful at drowning out with alcohol all these years. Meanwhile, Caroline arrived at Oliver's mansion and went up to his office as inconspicuously as possible. She realized that all the cameras in the house had probably caught her, but she hoped that in case the security service was displeased with her, the owner of the mansion would somehow protect her in front of them. The girl booted up the ultra-modern flat-screen computer, then entered all 10 digits written for her by Oliver into the password field. Within a second, a blue wheel was spinning on the screen, and then access to the landlord's desktop opened up. A folder labeled Cameras clicked open. Caroline selected the appropriate date and the Garage tab, then waited for the video she wanted to see to load. Literally seconds later, Caroline saw the garage room. And then, the girl did not believe her eyes at first. A red-haired beauty in expensive shoes and the head of security, the man who was supposed to protect Oliver, entered the garage. He quickly looked around and damaged both brake hoses in the very cars they were traveling in today. What followed was an equally disgusting scene. The red-haired beast, who Caroline realized was Molly, gave her partner a kiss, after which they both left the garage at a leisurely pace. Caroline copied the tape to a flash drive, shut down the computer, and only then called the police. When the investigator and the SWAT team arrived at the mansion, the head of security was already packing his bags, expecting to run away with his girlfriend abroad. But Molly, thinking that their cunning plan had come true and Oliver was dead, had no intention of sharing her loot with her lover. Molly was picked up at the airport as she tried to leave the country. The investigation later revealed that Molly was actually working for the same people who took out Marcus, Oliver's father. She didn't take out anyone specifically, but she was promised an extremely large percentage of Oliver's wealth if he died before reaching the site of his next negotiation. So here Molly had charmed the man closest to him and put the idea in his head that she and he could be perfectly happy if they eliminated their wealthy master. Now Molly and Oliver's head of security are facing a hefty prison sentence. In addition, Oliver's ex-fiancée has shamelessly ratted out her own masters to the investigation. After all, the deal with the police guaranteed her a reduced sentence, while her lover from security will receive the maximum. Thanks to Molly's confession, the ringleaders of the rival company that had ordered Oliver's father were quickly identified. As it turned out, they were longtime enemies of their family, the family of the oldest of the brothers, who'd always wanted to take over their grand business. Oliver, coming out of the hospital, realized a lot and completely rethought his life and attitude to people. The young man first of all forever stopped with parties. In addition, Oliver permanently canceled all the stupid rules and fired Amanda, who frightened everyone. After that, he hired a completely different, kind-hearted woman who could not only manage his household perfectly, but also interacted with all his employees and co-workers as if they were family. Caroline continued her work in the house, but now they were very close friends. Their shared story of saving Oliver's life brought them together, and that was just the beginning. 15 years later, there was nowhere to park in front of the school where Caroline had once attended. The car park was packed to the gills. So many people had dreamed of seeing each other. And they'd all been classmates once. Vanessa, now an elderly woman, and once slim, stood in the middle of the hall with her husband at her side. The seated middle-aged man clearly didn't understand why he had been brought here, but he couldn't resist the will of his wealthy wife. Vanessa began to look even more full and plump than before. But whereas before her fullness had been almost imperceptible and had given her some of the glamour of her lush forms, now everything pointed only to deterioration and health problems, which Vanessa either denied or did not think it necessary to address. The woman could barely squeeze into a thin, sparkling dress, expecting, as it seems, an unforgettable wow effect from her old school friends. However, those who admired Vanessa, and those who just pretended to admire her so as not to be pestered, could not appreciate the outfit, for the many folds made Vanessa look suspiciously like a sausage. Then a huge black car, gleaming clean, drove up to the school building. All those who were in the auditorium and were actively devouring the delicious food rushed to the window. They were curious as to who was in it. When the doors of the luxurious leather salon opened, a graceful, slender, taut leg appeared. It was wearing graphite gray boots made of the finest suede. Following this, a beautiful young woman stepped out of the car. Thin as a bamboo stalk, but not too thin either. Her body seemed to radiate health and youth, and the modest smile on her beautiful face involuntarily attracted all eyes, like a magnet. "What's going on? What are you all staring at?" Vanessa said impatiently, pushing through the crowd to the window. The woman gasped loudly, and then her face twisted with envy and anger. A few minutes later, Caroline entered the hall, beautiful and blooming like a beautiful flower. Her classmates stared dumbfounded at her gorgeous suit, a tee of English fabric, her flawless hair, and discreet but quality makeup. No one could have imagined that Caroline, whom they had all mocked so meanly in their youth, would not only not lose her natural beauty and charm, but on the contrary, become the most successful woman of them all. "Hello, Caroline, how are you?" Vanessa stepped forward. "I see you're doing pretty well for yourself. How much do you pay your beautician? Or are you still doing it the old-fashioned way with a cucumber?" Vanessa laughed, pleased with her joke. However, apart from her, no one else made a sound. "Hello, Vanessa." Caroline greeted her calmly. "I just came in for a few minutes. I wanted to see you all. Take another look at my past. One last time to make sure I hadn't lost anything." Caroline took a few more steps toward Vanessa and pointed to her neck. There, as before, hung her father's gift, a pendant in the shape of a star, which the girl had bought with her first salary. "You know, Vanessa, you haven't changed a bit," the woman told her, enjoying the way her former classmate was literally bursting with envy. "You're still just as stupid. And your jokes are stupid, too." Caroline looked at Vanessa from head to toe, and with one last glance at the crowd of her former classmates who had fallen from anger, boredom, and time, she slowly made her way back to the exit, saying one last time, "You see, life always knows who has done how much good and evil. Someone chooses to follow his star or gets a chance to become one of its rays. And someone remains an empty, shiny bubble for the rest of his life, from which the whole shell, alas, crumbles with time. Happy life to you all, boys." Caroline walked down to the door of the school. Her classmates immediately rushed back to the window. Oliver got out of the car that was waiting for her outside. He was still as tall and stately as ever, only now he wore a pair of slim-fitting glasses on the bridge of his nose. He was followed first by a boy of about 12, and then a girl of about 7. The children hugged Caroline happily, and Oliver smiled as he rubbed the heads of his offspring. Caroline turned round, and Oliver gave her a long kiss, full of tenderness and love. Then, after the whole story of the cars crashing into the river, he suddenly realized how different this girl was from any woman he had ever met. Courageous, strong, unbending, like a stem of bamboo. She always knew exactly what she wanted and was determined to achieve it. And tender and shy at the same time, pure as a petal of the most beautiful rose. She gave him everything he was looking for in this world and more. When he proposed to her, she told him yes. It was the happiest day of his life. When 6 months after the wedding Caroline told him that they were expecting a child, Oliver finally felt that he was no longer alone in the world. Now they both had a chance to live the life they both deserved, and nothing in the world could stop them. As Caroline and Oliver's car drove away, they did not see how hysterical Vanessa was long afterwards. How she tore at her artificial hair and how she cursed everything in the world, not understanding why Caroline, the technician's daughter, had been able to get everything in this life that should have been hers. Instead, all she had was money, which never made Vanessa happy. Yes, an alcoholic husband who married her just to get a good position in her father's company. Time had not spared her looks. Life hadn't added to her wisdom. And all this Vanessa realized only now, when it was too late to change anything. A bankrupt rich man came to visit his mother, who was abandoned in the middle of nowhere 5 years ago. And as he approached, that night, Walter's dreams were so vivid that when he woke up, he thought, "That's it. I'm drunk. I'm hallucinating." His head rattled so much that he had no strength to get out of bed. The man rolled over onto his side with difficulty and slowly got up. There were pills somewhere. He pulled out the nightstand drawer, fumbled inside with his hand to dissolve the pill in a glass of water. Walter drank and lay down again. He dreamt of his father that night. He was angry with his son, swearing and shouting. But what he did to his mother. "You're selfish and mean," his father said. And Walter stood in front of him as he had years before, as a child, and did not look up. "Mother spent her whole life raising you, denied herself an extra dress. And you," the dream was so explicit that Walter could almost physically feel the slap his father had given him. It was at this moment that his mother had to stand up for her son. She had always protected him from everyone, calmed his father when he was angry, defended him in front of his teachers at school, scolded the neighborhood kids, taking away his bicycle. Where is the mother? His father was getting more and more unruly. He was about to take off his belt and give Walter a beating. But Mum wasn't in the dream. She never came to save her son. And that realization made me feel cold inside. Fear gripped his whole body and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Walter woke up covered in sweat. The man hadn't seen his mother in 5 years. Maybe she's dead, he thought, and that thought made his head crack even harder. Walter slowly looked around the room. Slowly, he began to remember everything that had happened the day before. The bailiffs had shown up at the office yesterday with a notice that Walter no longer owned the firm, his accounts were seized, and he had to leave the flat within 10 days. "What the fuck are you guys doing?" Walter raged. "It's get the hell out of here or I'll call security." The man reached for the phone to dial the number of the head of security, but the uniformed man held out an ordinance to him. "What's this? What are you pulling at me?" "Your paperwork's failing." Walter was confused as he read what was printed on the white sheet of paper. The paper stated that the new owner of the firm was Monica Kravchenko. "Wait," the man said in a more peaceful tone. "Can I call the owner of this Monica who is in the paper here? I'll try to find out everything. I know her." "Please," the man in uniform said indifferently. "Just do your best. We won't be here long." Walter frantically dialed Monica's number, not understanding what had happened or why she owned his firm. This is some kind of misunderstanding, he thought. For a moment, the man thought he was being pranked, like on a famous TV show. Now the door will open and a film crew will come in. Everyone will shout it's a prank. A polite voice is heard in the receiver. "The subscriber is temporarily unavailable." "Shit," Walter cursed. "You can only take your personal belongings. Everything else must stay in the office." And seeing that his attempts to reach the new owner had failed, the bailiff pointed to the door. "Please." Still uncomprehending, the man headed for the door. On his way out, he mumbled, "I'll call the lawyers, I'll sort it all out. This is a misunderstanding." "It's your right." The uniformed man replied calmly, locking the door behind Walter. "Have a good day." Leaving the office, Walter dialed George's number. George was a childhood friend. "George." "We need to meet," the man said when his mate's voice came through the phone. "I'm in trouble." "No problem," Brother George replied. "Where and when?" "Let's meet at our bar on the seafront. Get there as soon as you can. All right?" "I will." When George walked through the door, Walter had almost emptied the bottle of whiskey. "Will you have a drink?" he asked his friend, and without waiting for an answer, poured the rest into the glass. "Goov, one more, and get something to eat." "You've got a lot on your plate." Bro George looked at his friend critically. "What's the occasion?" "You won't believe this. I got kicked out of my own office today. And they said my accounts are blocked, and I have to get out of my flat within 10 days. "So you see, they kicked you out of your own firm and won't let you back into your flat," George replied calmly. He sipped from his glass and took a bite of lemon slices. "Everything seemed fine with you, no problems." "I don't understand it either," Walter said in a stammering voice. "But the main thing, mate, you don't know the most important thing. They showed me a paper that says I'm no longer the owner of the company, but the new owner. Who do you think?" George looked with interest at his friend, who was already pouring from the bottle brought by the waiter. The man drank the whiskey, emptied the glass completely, trying to concentrate his gaze, looked into his mate's eyes. "The new owner of the firm is Monica Kravchenko." He said these words sarcastically, slowly, deliberately stretching each syllable so that George would understand faster. "You're Monica?" George seemed surprised. "How so? Did you sign the firm over to her? Are you stupid or what? It's enough that you provide for her with her boutique spas, foreign resorts. I wouldn't have thought of that. Then how did she come to own your firm and your flat?" George had a drink, too. "I know." Walter slammed his fist on the table, drawing the attention of the other bar patrons. The guard at the door tensed up, stretching, ready to throw the rowdy customer out the door. "Let's ask her." He took out his smartphone and dialed Monica's number, which was marked as favored in his contacts. But the caller was still unavailable. "No answer, bitch." The man swore. How about the spa? George suggested. That's where the girls usually switch their phones off. Damn it, Walter poured the glasses again. In the morning, he could hardly remember everything that happened afterwards, seeing that he'd had too much to drink. To avoid unnecessary trouble, the guard asked the friends to leave. Walter was indignant, trying to fight with the security guard. George persisted in dragging him into the air. He was assisted in this by the guard. George shoved Walter into the taxi and got in the front seat himself. Walter didn't remember anything else. Walter woke up in his bed with the realization that it was no longer his own. He slapped his bare feet on the floor. The man stalked into the kitchen, hoping there was something to drink in the fridge. George, that's the kind of friend you are. You could have supplied me with something for my hangover, Walter thought, unable to find anything that would help his health. Sighing heavily, he headed for the shower to get some relief and get back to normal. The jets of water were refreshing. For a moment, Walter's memory told him that the bailiff's paperwork had not mentioned his car. I'm going to go see Monica. Let her tell me how she so cleverly took over my firm, the man thought, drying himself with a fluffy towel. He hastily drank a cup of coffee, pulled on jeans and a t-shirt, and left the flat. There was no car in the yard. Walter remembered that he had left it outside the office. When he took a taxi to the office center, he was happy to see that his Jeep was parked in the car park. From the car, the man decided to call the office. Yes, Walter, the friendly voice of Mandy's secretary, answered the phone. Is anyone in my office? No, I'm in the waiting room. No one's come in, she answered. And when will you be here? Without answering the girl's question, he asked another. Has Monica been in? No, I said. No one's here. All right, work. Anyway, listen. Close everything up and go home. Get some rest. I'll call you later when there's news. The man turned the key in the ignition and drove out of the car park. He was determined. Now this bitch will explain everything. She'll tell me everything. I trusted her like I trusted myself. How did she manage to pull this on me? The Jeep flew down the avenue, overtaking cars, trolleybuses, buses. Walter imagined Monica telling him, honey, it was just a joke and everything would fall back into place. Entering the entrance of the house where his mistress lived, Walter pressed the button for the lift. But the lift was still not coming. He stood for a while and decided to climb the stairs to the 8th floor. The bell to the girl's flat rang with a cheerful trill. No one answered. Walter pressed the button again. Finally, the door opened. Monica stood on the threshold. You, what are you doing here? She asked. But Walter pushed her away and walked inside. You tell me what you're doing. Yesterday I found out that you've taken over my company and my flat and embezzled my bank accounts. The man went into the living room. Monica followed him leisurely, wrapping up her dressing gown. Why aren't you saying anything? Why are you flapping your eyes at me? The girl looked at Walter confusedly, with fear in her eyes. Suddenly the door to the bedroom opened, and George came out. Now, confusion appeared in Walter's eyes. It's you. What are you doing here? He asked his friend. I was asleep, as you see, he replied. Why here? Walter still didn't understand. George went to the bar, took out a bottle of wine and 3 glasses. He opened it slowly and, pouring the red liquid, handed 1 glass to Monica and sipped from the other. Shall we drink? He nodded at the glass. I'm driving, Walter replied. The absurdity of the situation kept him from realizing what was happening. But he was beginning to realize the worst of it. His best friend was sleeping with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend had somehow robbed him of everything he had earned over the past years. Will you explain something to me? Walter plopped down on the couch, folded his arms across his chest, and prepared to listen to his lover and his friend's explanations. "I'm asking both of you," he raised his voice, glancing at George and the girl. "Don't you yell," George told him calmly. "Not at home. In fact, you don't even have a home anymore. Monica owns the flat as well as the firm. So it's not in your best interest to make a fuss here. If you behave well, we'll leave you some money for the first time," said George. "You will? You'll leave me some?" Walter jumped up from the couch, grabbed George by the neck, and started to shake him. But the man pushed him with such force that he was instantly back where he had been. Walter wrapped his arms around his head. Everything that was happening seemed like a terrible dream, a nightmare, a delusion. "So you're the one who pulled this off and left me with nothing." It finally dawned on Walter that this was no joke, no prank. "What do you think?" George asked wryly. "Monica wouldn't do such a thing. She's not very clever, as you know, but she has many other talents." "Yes, Monica." George put his arm round the girl's waist and held her close to him. He looked victorious next to Walter, who was devastated after last night's binge, humiliated. "How could you, George? We've been friends since we were kids," Walter asked in a quiet voice. "Friends?" George let go of Monica and walked over to Walter, who was sitting on the couch. He leaned over him, his gaze angry and prickly. "Is that what friends do? You always acted like a king, always taking the best for yourself. I had to make do with what was left. You had the best girls, the best clothes. Your parents even gave you a car freshman year. I was always your shadow, always rushing to your aid when you were whining, George, help. Like yesterday, I came to you as soon as you called. Only that was the last time." Saying something like that? Walter tried to get a word in edgewise. "Shut up and listen." George cut him off. "I'll be running the firm from now on. Monica is just a formality. Without her, I couldn't have gotten the business away from you. I mean, you were head over heels in love with her. Fool. But you've always been emotionally driven and you've never thought straight. You're also too young and overconfident. No, Walter, you have no sense of self-preservation. And in this day and age, you can't trust anyone. You hear me? Not even the woman who spends the night with you. And you're the one who likes to talk about your successes," George continued. "So how much do you need for the first time? I'm not greedy. I can slip a few $1,000s from your old accounts." "Fuck you," Walter got up from the couch, looked angrily at his former, now no longer friend. Then he looked at Monica. "You're still a doormat, just like you were a doormat. You think he needs you? He'd trade you for another girl with longer legs." "All right, that's enough." George interrupted Walter. "Get out of here. Get out of here. And I don't want to see you again." George pushed Walter towards the exit. Back in the flat, he took out his suitcase and began to pack. A black anger was ripening in the man's soul, developing a filth-stinking, nasty, unbearable filth. Rolling the suitcase into the hallway, Walter returned to the bedroom and opened the safe. It was a good thing he'd been smart enough to keep at least some cash. He put a few wads of money into the suitcase, opened the door, and left the flat. The man had nowhere to go. He had been driving around the city for several hours, wondering if he could stay at a holiday resort on the bay. It was a good idea in itself, but Walter didn't want to be alone. He needed to talk, alone in nature. Only a bottle would do. Without noticing, Walter drove out of town. He remembered his nightmare. Why hadn't he dreamt about his mother? She always stood up for Walter when his father scolded him. The decision came naturally. He would go to the remote village where he had taken his mother 5 years ago. It was time to apologize for everything, to repent for getting rid of an aging woman, to live a life of pleasure, to fall to his knees and beg, plead, forgive him. Just so long as Mum was alive. Walter's mother, Tiffany, was originally from Vermont. Her parents lived in a lakeside village near a nature preserve. They worked on a ranch. Unlike other families that had 5 or 6 children, Tiffany's parents did not have many children. After giving birth to a daughter, Tiffany's mother underwent a complicated surgery and was unable to have any more children. The father, who had always wanted multiple sons, accepted it, but Tiffany grew up surprisingly docile. She helped her father and mother with everything. She carried water, stacked firewood, weeded the vegetable garden. Gradually, her father even began to take her hunting and fishing. Her mother tried to teach her the wisdom of cooking. On long winter evenings they spun, knitted and sewed warm clothes together: socks, mittens, hats, waistcoats. When Tiffany finished 9 grades, she was ready to leave for New York. The village slowly began to die out. The young people were moving away. Houses were falling into disrepair, left without owners. Having settled in the cities, the children took the elderly parents to their homes. When Tiffany's mother heard of her daughter's plans, she pleaded, "Daughter, how can we be without you? Who will bring us a glass of water in our old age? I'll go to college or university, finish, get a job and help you," Tiffany replied. "And my mother is right," said my father. "There's really nothing for girls to do here. I heard the other day they're closing the post office. We'll be traveling 40 miles for our pensions. Let her go, God willing, she'll do well and everything will be all right." Having reconciled, the mother helped her to pack her daughter's things, and on the appointed day she and her father took her in a pickup truck to the railway station. A month later they received a telegram. "Mom, Dad, I got into college." Tears came to the mother's eyes. Her father comforted her. "Tiffany's not stupid. She'll learn. She'll become a man. Maybe she'll take us with her." "Where can we go, Father?" "To New York," sobbed her mother. "Where would we go from our farm?" Tiffany was used to city life. After graduating from college, Tiffany got a job at a factory in the personnel department. That's where she met her husband. He was a foreman on the shop floor. For more than a year, the man courted the girl. He was 10 years older. So Tiffany was very shy of this grown man. But he was persistent, and after a year and a half, Tiffany and Stephen got married, planning a modest wedding. And after 3 more years, the works department gave the young family a flat. That's when they began to think about having children. But the years flew by, and Tiffany didn't get pregnant. Doctors said that she was completely healthy and did not understand the reason for the couple's childlessness. 10 years had passed since Tiffany had left her home village, moved away from her parents, and she was constantly writing letters to them. Dad and Mom answered them. But she couldn't go and visit her family. New York, with its frantic pace of life, wouldn't let her go. And yet Tiffany returned to the village. Only the occasion was not a happy one. One day she received a telegram from her father that her mother had died. Taking time off work, she and her husband bought train tickets and traveled to the funeral the same day. As they walked through the village streets to their home, Tiffany was struck by how different everything was. The windows of the ramshackle houses were boarded up. There were no flowering plants in the front gardens, and the cows and chickens could not be heard mooing in the yards. The village was dying. A few neighbors, mostly old men and women, stood at the gate of her father's house, black shawls tied around their heads. Tiffany walked into the house. On a stool stood the coffin in which her mother lay. The young woman cried as she crouched down beside it. She stroked her mother's head, her hands, gazing into her dead, peaceful expression. It was as if Mum was sound asleep. Only from that sleep there would never again be an awakening. After the wake, when the neighbors had dispersed, Tiffany and Stephen remained seated at the table with their father. "That's it, daughter. Our mum's gone," the man said softly. "She was ill. That's understandable. It's just a pity she didn't get to see her grandchildren." "Daddy, we can't have boys," Tiffany complained. She noticed her husband's reproachful look and lowered her eyes. "Do the doctors say they're just throwing up their hands?" Dad asked. "They say we're both healthy," she shrugged her shoulders. "Apparently our time has not yet come to become parents." "It's not the time," sighed the father. Sins do not give. What are our sins, Daddy? Tiffany got excited. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Sin is a multi-generational thing. You don't hear its reverberations right away. But you should repent for the sins of your ancestors. Well, it's time to go to bed. I'll go close up the cattle, and you make yourselves comfortable. We'll talk in the morning. And in the morning the father woke up the sleeping couple and took his daughter and son-in-law to the forest. They walked for a long time along a narrow path until they came to a waterfall, a turbulent stream of water jets falling down from a high rock, creating an iridescent fountain of splashes in the sunlight. The spray played with different colors, flying in a fine trot in all directions. In the bowl at the foot of the waterfall, the water calmed down, allowing me to see the reflection of my face, slightly distorted by the movement of the water. "Take off your clothes," Father ordered. "Dip yourself in the water 3 times and cross yourself." "Am I not baptized?" Stephen tried to object, to whom the whole ritual seemed like nonsense. "Just say, 'Forgive me, Lord,'" the man said firmly, stroking his gray beard. "He might hear you. We're not Christians." Tiffany and Stephen went down to the waterfall bowl and did as their father had instructed. They walked home in silence, each thinking about something different. "At dinner," Father said, "the old people used to say, if someone dies in a family and a child appears in the same year, it means that God has forgiven the sins of the deceased. God is merciful. He will forgive our mom and give you children." Stephen looked at his father-in-law in surprise. Tiffany only spoke, "God willing, Daddy, God willing." A month later, the woman found out she was pregnant. And in May, she and her husband had a beautiful baby boy, Walter. The couple was happy they couldn't get enough of the baby. The joy of the birth of a son overshadowed the death of Tiffany's father. The news that came from the neighbors, already after the funeral of the man, for 10 years of childless life they managed to save money. Therefore, immediately after the birth of their son, Tiffany and Stephen bought a cooperative 2-room flat in a new building, in which a separate room was allocated for Walter. Stephen quickly sobered up from the euphoria of becoming a father. He tried to teach his son to work hard, be responsible, and stand up for himself. But Tiffany continued to nurse him like a hen. "You're too hard on your son, Stephen," she told her husband, who made her 3-year-old son take out the bin. "He is still very young. It's nothing, he can lift a cup, but will he carry the bucket away?" On weekends, his father dragged his son to the park for a jog, made him do push-ups and pull-ups on the bar. And when he was 5 years old, he gave him to a boxing class. However, after the first bruise received by his son at the training, his mother flatly refused to take the child to boxing. "Do you want to make your only son an invalid?" She objected to her husband's arguments that the boy should grow up to be a man. Stephen was madly in love with his wife. It was difficult for him to argue with her. The man tried to avoid the slightest cause for quarrel, so in most cases Tiffany was able to win the right to bring up her son as she wanted. Walter was never denied anything. The best toys, a bicycle, beautiful things bought in brand-name shops, all this was taken for granted. Walter was not a stupid boy, though. At school, he studied for a solid 4. Teachers praised the bright pupil, but his discipline was lousy. With his friend George, who lived in the next door, they were always inventing new pranks. One day they bought a rat from a pet shop and put it in the teacher's desk drawer. When she opened it to take out her notebook, she nearly fainted. The mother was summoned to the principal's office. Blushing, she apologized for her son and promised that she would have a very serious talk with him at home. The next day, Walter and George broke a window in the teacher's lounge by throwing a basketball at it. Tiffany had to tell her husband. The principal strictly ordered that new glass be put into the window frame immediately, but the woman herself could not do it. As punishment, Walter was banned from the yard for a week. During spring break, he sat at home, looking out the window as the boys played in the yard. Still, Tiffany's son's childhood was no worse than other children's. In the 9th grade, Walter was given a moped for his birthday. At the end of the first year of the institute, his father bought him a new car. Parents loved their son with all their hearts, and no matter how hard they tried to bring him up in strictness, paid for his growing needs. After graduating from the economics department of the institute, the boy got a job in a large trading firm. "I'm not going to work for my uncle all my life," he told his parents. "Here I will gain experience, learn how everything is actually arranged there. I'll open my own firm." Father by that time had already retired, but continued to work, having traveled a long professional path from a simple worker to the master of the shop, and then the head of production. He thought that trade was not a serious business. The man repeatedly persuaded his son to go to work at the plant in the planning and economic department, but he only waved him away. "Here is your factory, the last century," said Walter. "The future is in business." Dad just shook his head. He thought that business was all about bandits, while an honest man should work for the good of his country. He himself lived like that until the last day, every morning passing through the factory gate. Walter's father passed away without giving anyone long suffering and agony. One day he fell asleep and never woke up. He died quietly, in his sleep. Walter turned 30 years old that year. After his father's funeral, Walter felt he was in charge of the family and felt it was his time to make decisions. He left the firm, sitting in his room in front of his computer 24 hours a day. Then one day he said to his mother, "I know you and your father had savings. I've decided to start my own firm and I want to ask you for money." "How much do you need?" Tiffany asked. "The more the better. I need to rent an office, buy office equipment, but I also need money for the first batch of goods," Walter replied. "I'll give it to you." "Sure, son," agreed his mother, who was not used to refusing Walter. A year later, Walter was already the director of a trading company, which did not bring super profits but worked quite successfully. The staff was a few dozen employees, which son Tiffany paid salaries on time, and especially enterprising even encouraged bonuses and trips to seaside resorts. And he was in no hurry to return the money his mother had given him to start the business. Tiffany didn't ask him to. She was happy that her son was doing what he loved and that he was good at it. As time went on, and one day Walter came home and told his mother, "I'm bringing a girl over tonight, so make us something for dinner." Tiffany smiled. She had been waiting for her son to marry for a long time, but there was no one in their house except his friend George, with whom they had been inseparable since childhood, and suddenly Walter would bring a girl. Maybe they'll even announce that they're getting married. Tiffany would be sure to bless the young couple so that all would be well in their lives. She really wanted to babysit her grandchildren. Her son is in his 30s, and he's not even thinking about kids. Walter met Monica at a club. A spectacular girl in a short, tight dress immediately attracted the attention of the guy. Bright, with a defiant look. She was the kind of girl they say pretty devil. She sat behind the bar and slowly sipped her cocktail. "Do you miss me?" Walter asked and sat down next to her. The girl looked at him with an appraising gaze. Apparently she liked the young man, decently dressed, attractive, and when he pulled his wallet out of his pocket, took out a large note and handed it to the bartender, saying, "I'll have a whiskey and the girl will have whatever she's drinking." The pretty girl smiled white-hot. Walter, the man, introduced himself. "Monica," the girl said, stretching her name slightly. "I mean here alone." "What are you interested in?" The girl was obviously flirting with her new acquaintance. "Very serious," Walter said, and put his palm on Monica's waist. "Be careful," she warned him. "I might hurt you." How could such a sweet, charming girl offend a poor, lonely guy? I wouldn't believe it. Walter tried to make a joke. "Here's to introductions," he drank, pushed the glass away from him, and said to the bartender mate, "Do it again." Monica, sipping her cocktail leisurely, looked at the man. "Are you alone?" the girl asked. "Not exactly. My friend and I agreed to meet here, to have a little fun, and all that work and work," answered Walter, calculating the next portion of whiskey. "So I'm the third extra?" Monica made a jokingly sad expression on her face. "Where does poor Walter work that he's so tired?" "Poor Walter works at his own firm." "Wait, what's poor Walter?" "He's not poor. He's a very rich man." He started to flounder a bit. "There's my friend George." George came to the counter. Walter introduced George to his new girlfriend, and the group moved into the lounge and took a table. Walter found himself liking Monica more and more, and this liking grew in proportion to the drink. The club was already closing when the group poured out into the street. Monica put her arms around Walter's neck and whispered, "Would you like to continue the evening?" "I'd love to," Walter mumbled. "Then let's go back to my place." "Do you have a drink?" she asked, pulling him close to her by his slim waist. "Do you have any?" Walter spent the night at Monica's, and in the morning, barely able to get his head off the pillow, decided to call George. He had to get home somehow, and George hadn't had much to drink last night. Might as well pick him up brotherly. The phone rang with long beeps. No one answered. "You're up, sweetheart." "Good morning." Monica stretched sweetly in bed. She reached over to the bedside table, where a bottle of champagne stood. She poured it into a glass, drank it, and handed it to Walter. "Want some?" "It'll give you a headache." Monica waved her head, tossing her hair over the pillow. "Don't you have anything stronger?" Walter asked. "Come on, anyway." "There's no ride home," he agreed. "What about a taxi? Or do you just not want to go?" Monica wagged her finger at him. Walter fell into the hottie's arms. Finally, tearing themselves away from each other, they lay silent, breathing heavily. Walter was the first to break the silence. "I'm kind of hungry. Should I cook something to eat?" No cooking." "I hate the cooker and everything that goes with it," she said flatly. "Why don't we go out and have lunch?" "Where?" "A restaurant, for example." "Let's do that." Walter decided that this wonderful night must have a beautiful ending. "I'll just make one phone call," he said. "Okay. I'm going to take a shower." Wrapped in a sheet, Monica stalked down the corridor. Tiffany was in a hurry to get home from work. She had to run to the shop to buy cheese and sausage. Today her son would bring his girlfriend to meet her. That thought made her happy. Surely this girl from his work. She's probably smart, kind, and very pretty. There's no other way around it. Her boy won't go out with just anyone. After changing her clothes, the housewife put on an apron and began to prepare dinner. She sent the chicken, carefully marinated since the morning, into the oven and began to prepare the appetizers. In the living room, she spread a beautiful tablecloth on the table and arranged the dishes and utensils. Tiffany was almost ready when the doorbell rang. She hurried into the hallway. "Mum, we're here." Walter greeted her mother cheerfully, kissing her on the cheek. "This is Monica." "Pleased to meet you," the woman replied, looking at the girl with a smile. She looked nothing like the image Tiffany had painted in her mind of her future daughter-in-law, bright, tall, and wearing a short skirt. "I'm Tiffany," she introduced herself. The girl smiled silently back. She looked around the spacious hallway with interest. "Why are we standing here?" "Come into the hall." Tiffany invited her son and his girlfriend. "I'll be right there." The woman went into the kitchen, while Monica continued to turn her head from side to side. "Nice place you have here. Do you live here alone?" "Yes, my father died and it's just me and my mum," Walter said, uncorking a bottle of champagne. "Why don't you get married?" the girl asked. It had never occurred to me. Maybe I haven't met the one I want to spend my life with, replied the man. Are you sure? Or maybe your mum doesn't let you. Monica laughed, and Walter looked at her, not knowing whether she was joking or seriously considering him a mama's boy. Stop it. I have a great mum, he hugged the girl. Tiffany came into the room. When she saw the young people, she was a little confused. Well, everything is ready. We can sit down at the table. The woman had a dish with fried chicken in her hands. It smells so good, Mummy. Walter wiggled his nose. I love it when you bake chicken with your signature recipe. Thank you, son, Tiffany replied. Wanting to lighten the mood a little, she turned to Monica. What do you, Monica, like to cook? Can you share a recipe? Monica looked at the woman, then at Walter. I don't like to cook anything, she replied. I prefer to eat in restaurants or, at the very least, order takeout. It was Tiffany's turn to be surprised. How can you do that? How are you going to feed your husband and children? After all, we all know the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. That wisdom works, believe me. So you married Walter's dad because of your chicken frying skills? Monica asked, not the least bit embarrassed, reaching for the salad. Tiffany stopped chewing for a moment. She thought the question was downright rude and insensitive. The smile slowly slid off the woman's face. She looked at Monica, who was putting on the salad, not noticing that she had said something wrong. Sensing the awkwardness of the situation, Walter tried to gloss over it. Mummy, Monica wanted to say that you are a very good cook, and Daddy just couldn't help but fall in love with such a good hostess. He looked at Monica. She nodded her head. Yes, that's what I was going to say, she said, still chewing. The dinner conversation did not go well. After tea and cake, Walter and Monica left. I'll see Monica off and come back, he kissed his mother on the cheek. She continued to clear the dishes from the table. She did not say goodbye to her guest, showing her displeasure with her son's choice. When the son returned home, Tiffany was about to go to bed. She took a sedative. The woman couldn't get over Walter's girlfriend. She seemed rude, defiant. She was nothing like Tiffany had imagined her future daughter-in-law to be. Mama, are you still awake? Walter asked, peering into his mother's bedroom. No, son, she sighed. Your friend made my blood pressure skyrocket, and I had to take medicine. Mom, why do you have to make things so complicated? The man was indignant. Monica is a normal, modern girl. If she doesn't want to stand at the cooker, she doesn't have to. Nowadays, you can really order ready meals, and the laundry can be delivered to the laundrette. Specially trained people can clean the house too. Why bother? Is it not normal that a woman wants to be beautiful and well-groomed, not tortured by constant cooking, laundry, and cleaning? Do you think I'm tortured? Tiffany asked. Yes, all the years I took care of your father. He always had clean, ironed shirts, and he was always well-fed, and the delicious dumplings we used to make together. Don't you remember? And this one of yours probably has no idea how normal people make dumplings, pies, or where clean linen comes from in the cupboard. Mom, this is my choice in my life. Walter tried to argue with his mother. She doesn't want anything from you but money. Look at her. She's dressed like Tiffany almost swore, though she wasn't in the habit of doing that. I'm sorry, God. If your father had seen that tarnished, tastelessly dressed and ill-mannered girl. Here we go. I'm going to bed. I have to get up early tomorrow, said Walter. He walked out of his mother's bedroom, closing the door behind him. Tiffany sat at the dressing table for a while longer, looking at her face in the mirror. Since her husband's death, she had visibly deteriorated. Her face showed signs of fatigue. Maybe I should retire, she thought. It wasn't the first time Tiffany had thought it was time to stop working. Her health was failing more and more. Her eyesight was getting worse. Then there were the computers that now had to be mastered. Tiffany was having a hard time. The younger generation, on the other hand, was getting up to speed and not afraid to work with any software. It's decided I'll talk to the boss tomorrow. If there is a candidate to take my place, I'll make way for the young people and go on a well-deserved holiday, she decided. Walter's mood was high. His trading company was 1 year old. As director and owner, he could see the results. Profits were growing. There were more and more partners, and the accounts were finally beginning to show a substantial amount of money. On this occasion, the man decided to thank his employees and organize a party. The staff took the news with enthusiasm. It was decided to free the meeting room, decorate it, and order catering with snacks, drinks, and dishes from the restaurant. On the appointed day, everyone gathered to celebrate the firm's anniversary. George and Monica were also invited. Dear friends, colleagues, Walter addressed the audience. I am happy that we are celebrating the first birthday of our company. I would like to thank you for believing in the success of our business from day one and doing everything to make it grow, bring us success and profit. Thank you. The people applauded loudly. I had no idea that your employees loved and respected you so much, Monica said, hugging Walter around the neck. All evening she had been showing that she was directly related to the director, that she was not just his girlfriend, but his favorite girl. Monica had far-reaching plans for Walter. Except his mother Tiffany might be a problem. The other day, Walter gave Monica a luxurious fur coat. However, the gift was not bought on the man's initiative. They were driving through town, and Monica saw a fur store. She asked to come in, because she really likes beautiful fur coats and mantos. The man was unable to object. The girl drove him crazy, and he could not give up his love adventures with Monica. Laving between the racks of coats and mantos, the girl tried on one or the other. At last she came out to Walter, who was drinking coffee on a sofa, spinning round and round. The blue mink coat was very much to the face of the tall and slender Monica. But the price tag that dangled from the sleeve confused Walter. Honey, Monica pouted with greasy scarlet lipstick. Don't I deserve such a gift from you? Look at something else, darling. And preferably this number should be 1 less 0, the man suggested. No, I want this one. It suits me very well. Don't you think it's a little overpriced? It's overpriced. In Europe you can buy much cheaper. Walter tried to dissuade the girl from buying it. But Monica stood her ground. The man had to agree. Wrap it up, he said to the saleswoman, slightly damaging his mood. Prevented Walter from rejoicing in the renewal together with Monica. But very soon the girl was able to lift his spirits by dragging him to her house. He returned home at midnight. The morning coffee, prepared by Tiffany, was invigorating and set him up for work. Walter stepped out of the shower and joined his mother. The woman carefully tossed her son a plate of sandwiches. Did you get home late last night? Did you have to work late? She asked Walter. No, he answered briefly. Where were you then? Walter put the cup on the table, hesitated for a moment, then answered in an irritated tone. Mum, what am I, 5 years old? Are you going to control me all my life? Where I want to be, I'll be there. When I want, then I come. What do you care? Calm down, Tiffany said. I was just wondering, Tiffany said. She was startled. Her son had never let her raise her voice before. It's just that you usually tell me how you spend your time with George, she added. Walter got up from the table, leaving the cup with the unfinished coffee. I'm out of here. Lots of work, sorry, he said, and turned around, leaving the kitchen. He didn't even kiss his mother goodbye. The conversation hadn't gone well, and the morning wasn't going well. In fact, Tiffany wanted to tell her son about her decision to take a well-deserved retirement. The day before, she'd talked to the head of human resources at the plant. And it turned out she'd been wanting her niece to take Tiffany's place for a long time. But only she was shy to say, because Tiffany had worked at the same place all her life and was honored by the bosses. The issue had resolved itself in a fortnight. The woman would be retiring, giving way to a new generation. Now she wondered how her son would react. Surely he would be pleased. Tiffany was already making plans. First, she wanted to buy a trip to a sanatorium. She'd wanted to go to Karlovy Vary in the Czech Republic for a long time. True, she would have to ask Walter to pay back some of the money she had lent him a year ago to start a business. But her son was apparently doing well, and he would give her the money. And then, when she got back from her trip, she'd renovate the flat. It will be necessary to hire a good team of workers to do everything qualitatively and quickly. And in the renovated flat, she would be able to live out her life. That was Tiffany's plan as she planned to leave work. But that evening, Walter didn't come home again. After work, he went to Monica's house, taking her favorite champagne on the way. After a pleasant time, they lay cuddled together. Walter, the girl murmured, "How about it?" What he said. "Will you marry me?" "What do you mean yours? Yes or no?" She whispered caressingly in his ear. "I will," Walter answered. "When?" Monica persisted. "Tomorrow, isn't it?" Walter finally came to his senses and looked at the girl. "Are we that bad or what?" he asked. Monica reached over to the nightstand for a packet of cigarettes. "I knew it," she said resentfully. "I knew you were just like all men. You come to me, and then you marry some gray mouse." "What made you think that?" the man asked, opening the window to light a cigarette. "If you wanted to marry me, you would have proposed already. What am I, a girl for an hour or something?" "Don't talk nonsense," Walter said. "Don't I give you money? I don't buy you presents. I don't fulfill your wishes." "That's all right. But a wife is something else. If a man marries, he proves his love. You love me, don't you?" "I do." "All right, if that's the way you want it, we'll get married." He put out his cigarette. "Then come to me, my little cat." Walter couldn't resist Monica. A few days later, he picked Monica up after work and they went to his house to tell Tiffany that they were getting married. To mark the occasion, the girl wore a new fur coat Walter had bought her. Let his mother see that he spared nothing for her. Tiffany wasn't expecting any guests. She wasn't feeling well today. Her blood pressure spiked and she had to take some medicine. She lay on the sofa in the living room and turned on the television softly. When she heard the sound of the door opening in the hallway, she didn't get up. She knew it was her son. "Mom, you're home. We're home," shouted Walter from the hallway, helping Monica out of her outerwear. Realizing that her son had not returned alone, Tiffany got up from the couch. Walter and Monica entered the room. "Hi, were you resting or something?" the man asked. "Yeah, I wasn't feeling well," the mother replied. "Hello, Tiffany." Monica tried to appear polite, but still caused negative emotions in Tiffany, which she could hardly hide. "Hello, Monica. Come on in." "I'll put the kettle on." The woman went into the kitchen, but Monica beat her to it. "Don't worry, sit down, rest, I'll do it myself," Monica said. "Yes, Walter, go ahead." He lightly slapped her just below her back. But Tiffany noticed his gesture and wrinkled her nose, disliking the girl even more. When everyone was seated at the table, Monica elbowed Walter in the side. She couldn't wait for him to tell her mother that they were getting married soon. "Mom, Monica and I have something we want to tell you." Walter began, trying to keep his tone solemn, but he hesitated a little. "Why are you slowing down, Walter?" said the girl loudly and clearly, not waiting for the groom to make up his mind to announce the news. "Tiffany, we're getting married." Tiffany sighed and stared into her teacup. Oh, and yet the contagion is unapologetic, she thought. "Yes, Mum, tomorrow we'll go and apply at the registry office. There are some people we know there, so we won't have to wait long. I think we can get married in a month." "What's the rush? Is she pregnant?" The woman nodded towards Monica, not even wanting to say her name. "Are you crazy?" The girl was indignant. "I'm pregnant." "Well, no, that's not me. It's just that usually those who are in such a hurry are those who have noticed a baby in their sin. Normal people prepare for a wedding deliberately, thinking about every step," Tiffany said calmly and judiciously. "Walter, have you heard? According to your mother, we're not normal people." "I'm shocked." "Walter, why aren't you saying anything?" Monica echoed loudly. "Keep it down, please," Walter's mother asked. "I have a terrible headache." "Mum, it's what we decided," said the man calmly. "It's out of the question. We came with Monica to tell you the news first." "Thank you for that," sighed the mother. She sipped her tea, took a candy from the vase, and slowly unwrapped the wrapper. "Aren't you glad? Don't you have anything more to say?" "I'm glad when you're happy. That's all I can tell you," Tiffany replied. "But since you come to me with news, I have something to tell you." The couple stared at the woman in surprise. Taking another bite of her chocolate candy, Tiffany finished her tea. "As of Monday, I'm taking a well-deserved holiday. I've decided that I've had enough of working, and it's time to take a break," she said. "Congratulations, Mum." "It's about time," Walter exclaimed. "Wait, don't interrupt me and listen," the mother continued, looking into her son's eyes. "First of all, I want you to know that I want to have a healthy holiday. That's why I plan to buy a trip to Karlovy Vary. There is good air, mineral springs, all conditions for treatment of my arthritis and hypertension." "That's great. I support this idea and I'm happy for you," Walter replied. "While I'm in the Czech Republic, I'll need to renovate my flat," Tiffany continued. "So I've decided to hire a team of decorators and have them do it right, so I don't have to think about how to fix it up later. I think it'll be enough to last me a lifetime." Walter looked round the kitchen. The flat really should have been renovated a long time ago. Especially nowadays, everything was done with beautiful, modern materials. And if they brought in a designer, they could make a luxury flat out of their 3-bedroom. "In that connection, Walter, I'd like to ask you to return the money I gave you for your business. I'm going to need it now," Tiffany said. Walter looked up and stared at his mother. Monica looked at her lover in surprise. It was obvious that he was confused. His mother's desire to get the money back came as a surprise to the man. To be honest, he had already forgotten, thanks to whom he was able to start so successfully and turn the firm, as they call it, from scratch. "I hope to get it next week, because I have to pay for the trip and give a deposit to the construction team," the mother added. The woman calmly finished her tea, pretending not to notice how puzzled her son was. Monica did not understand anything at all. Only one thing was clear to her: the wedding seemed to be on the verge of failure. It was not enough for the girl to sign and become Walter's wife. She dreamed of a lavish wedding with a museum restaurant and a huge number of guests. Monica was the first to break the silence in the kitchen. "You know what, Tiffany? You should be ashamed to ask Walter for money. He's your own son, not a creditor. And besides, we have a big event coming up. Do you want us to celebrate our wedding in the dining room?" "Shut up," Walter said quietly. But Monica was unstoppable. "You're old. You don't need much. Buy yourself a trip to a boarding house in Los Angeles County and relax for a month. You can renovate it in 2 or 3 years. What, do you have to have celebrities here so you can do a fancy renovation?" Shut up, Monica. Walter tried to calm the girl down. No, Walter, I will not shut up. I'm your wife for 5 minutes, and therefore I have the right to decide where to spend your money. If I say there's going to be a wedding, there's going to be a wedding, or you'll never see me again. The girl literally jumped from the table, quickly dressed and slammed the door. Walter tried to rush after her, but Tiffany stopped him abruptly. Sit down, I haven't finished, she said. Confused, the man slumped back in his chair. That's a lot of money, he said. You have to be warned about such things in advance. This money is still in circulation. Soon we'll have to pay for another shipment of goods. It's not even one lorry, but several. Do you realize how much money that is? I have no idea, and I don't want to think about it, Tiffany said firmly. When you needed the money, I gave it to you with no terms or conditions. I was counting on your integrity. Now I need it, and I want it back without disrupting my plans. Mom, don't you care about my plans? Walter asked indignantly. I come to you, tell you I'm getting married, that Monica and I are going to celebrate the wedding in a restaurant, and you don't react to that? How am I supposed to react, son? It's your life, your decision. What does that have to do with me? Walter asked. What does it have to do with you? You should at least be happy and at most help me, Tiffany replied. No, my dear. Everything I had to do, I did for you. You're an adult. You're well into your 30s. So the word should doesn't apply to me now. It's up to you to look after, protect, and support your mother in her old age. Or do you have a different opinion? You're being unfair by denying me the opportunity to marry, Walter said sadly. I'm not stopping you. Marry whoever you want to marry. Give me the money. And let's end this pointless conversation. Tiffany left the kitchen and went to her bedroom. Walter sat there thinking. He was working out in his mind how to get out of this situation without arguing with his mother and Monica, and without losing profits at the firm. He did have to pay for another shipment of goods, and it was quite a large sum. He dialed Monica's number, deciding to go to her to discuss everything, and at the same time to stay at her place for the night. But she didn't answer the phone. She's offended, Walter thought. He switched off the kitchen light and left the flat. Getting into his car, the man headed for his mistress's house. The light in her window was on. Walter noticed this as he drove up to Monica's house. But when he rang the doorbell, no one answered. The man started pounding on the door with his fist. Monica, open up, we need to talk. Footsteps were heard outside the door. Walter breathed out a sigh of relief. What do you want? Monica asked through the door. Talk. We already did. I thought you were a man. Turns out you can't make up your mind without your mummy. Yes, I can, honey. Open up, Walter asked. The door opened softly. A man stepped into the hallway. Monica stood with her back against the wall, her lips down and her eyes on the floor. Her whole appearance showed how much she resented Walter and his mother. Well, aren't you sorry, honey? The man tried to hug her, but Monica pushed him away. Tell me, who do you want to live with, Mummy or me? Monica asked. Of course with you, my love, answered Walter. Then why don't you consider me at all? Do I have to get married in a dressing gown? And my guests will eat Olivier and potatoes with cutlets in the dining room. Don't worry, it won't happen. You just have to wait a little longer, Walter urged her. I don't want to wait. Can't your mother wait with her silly whims? Monica was indignant. I don't know, dear, but we'll think of something together. So he pulled the girl against him and quietly pushed her towards the bedroom. Monica gave in. She knew what strings Walter could pull. Then, lying in bed, they thought of a plan of action. Should we send your mother to a relative? Monica asked. Why? Walter didn't understand. To keep her out of the way. Don't you understand? Let her stay here. We'll have a wedding in the meantime. And when she gets here, you'll give her the money, or part of the debt. She doesn't even have any relatives. Walter puffed on his cigarette. She had relatives. Only her father and mother lived in a remote village, but they died a long time ago. I was just a kid. Where is this village? The mistress asked. Somewhere in Montana. And I didn't seem to go into much detail. Didn't her parents leave her daughter anything when she died? If there's no one else, she must have inherited something. Oh, please don't be ridiculous. What inheritance is there in a remote village? It's a small house, but it's probably rotten by now. My mother once went to my parents' grave and told me that almost all the houses in the village were abandoned. Everything was dead. Monica raised herself up on her elbows and looked carefully into Walter's eyes. There was triumph in her gaze. That's the way out, my dear, she whispered, smiling. Walter arrived home on time on the appointed day. Tiffany noticed that Walter was acting strangely, always trying to give her something. Then he called her to have tea together and talk. After the fight the other day, they'd hardly spoken. But apparently the son had come to his senses and realized that his mother was right. Walter poured the aromatic tea he'd brewed himself into cups and moved the sugar to Tiffany. How are things going at the firm, son? The woman asked. It's fine, as usual. We're working, making progress. You know we're not going backwards, Walter said, smiling. The mother thought his smile was strained, unnatural. What do you do? Did you go to a travel agency? Tiffany began to tell her, but her son interrupted her, asking for a clean hand towel. The woman went to her room, and he quickly pulled a vial from his pocket and dribbled it into his mother's cup. It was a sleeping pill. Here you go. The mother handed Walter a towel. Thank you, Mum. Now you can drink your tea in peace. You drink too. As they talked, the woman drank the whole cup and suddenly felt faint. She leaned against the wall. I don't feel well, Walter, she said. But the man had already taken her in his arms and carried her into the room. He laid her on the sofa and hurried into the hallway to open the front door. She's asleep. Everything worked out, Monica asked as she entered the flat. Yes, I think she's asleep. We're in a hurry. We have to get there before she wakes up. Walter took his mother in his arms and Monica grabbed a blanket and pillow from the couch. They left the flat and walked down to the courtyard. The man put his mother in the back seat, placing a pillow under her head, and covered her with the blanket. Opening the boot, he threw in Tiffany's warm clothes that Monica had collected. Several bags of groceries stood nearby. Slamming the doors, Walter and Monica hit the road. As they pulled onto the motorway, Walter increased his speed. He drove as fast as he could, afraid that his mother would wake up and his and Monica's plan would fail. By 5 a.m., they reached the remote village where Tiffany had been born and raised. They found her parents' house. There was hardly any snow in town, but here it was knee-deep. Walter made his way to the gate and struggled to open it, and then the door to the house. He went back to the car, carried his mother into the hut, and put her on the bed. Where should I put the groceries? Monica asked. She was standing in the doorway holding the bags. Over there on the table, Walter pointed. He covered the mother with a blanket and put a coat on top to keep her warm. Let's go, Monica. They closed the door and drove away. They glimpsed abandoned houses with boarded-up shutters, lit by headlights. Tiffany woke up and felt terribly cold. She struggled to open her eyes. Her head hurt badly. She tried to get up, but fell back onto the bed, feeling completely powerless. Where am I? Thought the woman. There were wooden walls all around. Faint daylight shone through the boarded-up windows. It took a while for Tiffany to realize that she was in her parents' house. But how she had come to be here, the woman didn't understand. The last thing she remembered was Walter giving her tea. And then darkness. "Masters, is anyone there?" There was a man's voice. There was a banging on the door. Tiffany tried to answer, but her tongue stuck to her mouth. "Hey," came another shout from outside. "I'm here," she said in a hoarse whisper. Her throat ached terribly. The door opened. A man with a gray beard, wearing a warm jacket and a winter hat, appeared on the threshold. When he saw the woman lying on the bed under some things, he rushed to her. "Who are you? What's the matter with you?" he asked Tiffany, patting her cheeks. "Are you all right?" "It's cold," she whispered. "Now wait, let me help you." The man grabbed a blanket, wrapped it around Tiffany, threw off his jacket and covered her with it, tucking it under her side. "How did you end up here? No one's been here in ages." She stared at him, unable to say a word. A man ran out of the house in a jumper. He was back in a minute. "I'll get some wood. I'll heat the stove. It'll be warm. You just put your head down for now. Wait a bit." In a few minutes, the wood was crackling in the stove. Tiffany could see the glow of scarlet flame through the crack in the door. The cooker was warped and wouldn't close tightly. "I see you've made a good home here. How much groceries did you bring?" Tiffany turned her head and saw the man looking at the bags on the table. She warmed up a little and began to come round. The woman realized that Walter had brought her here to keep her. She was against his wedding, and she demanded the money back. Meanwhile, the man had put a cloth rucksack on the table. "I'll pour you some hot tea. You'll warm up quickly," he said, and took a thermos out of the rucksack. He unscrewed the lid of the glass and poured the hot, aromatic drink into it. Taking a seat next to Tiffany on the bed, he helped her up. "Here you go. It's delicious." "Thank you." The woman took a few sips and thanked him. "What's this?" "I make it myself. It's rosehip, hawthorn, and some other herbs," the man replied. "Do you feel better?" "Yes, I'm almost completely warmed up. And I'm walking, looking at the tracks of a car. From it, footprints lead to the house," began to tell the stranger. "No one has been in this house for ages, and now hello guests have arrived. So I thought I'd go in and check who had arrived. And here you are." "Who are you?" Tiffany asked. As she drank the hot tea, she felt invigorated. Her headache was gone. "Oh, forgive me, you old fool. I forgot to introduce myself," the man apologized. "I'm Oscar, the local forester." "Oscar? How strange," Tiffany said thoughtfully. "Why strange?" The man didn't understand. Tiffany sat up on the bed. She felt the warmth of the house. The crackling logs in the cooker warmed not only her body but also her soul. She looked round the room. The colored wallpaper had almost completely fallen off the walls. The ceiling looked back at her. Old curtains were hanging from the windows. "My mum made them when I was a girl. This is my home. You see, I grew up here, lived with my parents, then went to the city to study and stayed there. My daddy's name was Oscar. He was a forester in those days. Everyone in the neighborhood respected him. He was a very good man." Oscar listened in surprise at first, and then he laughed. "So I'm a forester too. Oscar, like your father. What a coincidence. I never would have guessed. And of course I've heard that a very good man used to be a forester here. But I didn't know we were namesakes." Oscar laughed again. "How did you end up here? Where are your relatives and friends? The car you came in. I saw the tracks. A jeep or some other off-road vehicle? I don't know, Tiffany said sadly. I guess I don't have any family or loved ones anymore. The forester took her hand in his, noticing the sadness of her new acquaintance. Don't jump to conclusions. Things happen in life, he sighed tiredly. Then he squared his shoulders and spoke in a cheerful voice. If you've decided to stay here, you'll have to put the house in order. I'll help you. Do you mind? No, not at all. Tiffany smiled. Who wouldn't want help under these circumstances? Thank you. All day long, Oscar and Tiffany tidied up the house. The first thing the man did was to take away the boards that had been used to board up the windows and fix the doors, which had fallen apart. Tiffany got to work scrubbing the floors and windows. After removing the old curtains, she poured water into a basin and prepared to wash. But Oscar stopped her. You shouldn't have such old curtains in the house, Tiffany. So what am I going to do without curtains? We'll put up new ones, Oscar said confidently. Where are we going to get them? Wondered the woman. If we look hard enough, we'll find them, said the forester in a mysterious tone. Tiffany shrugged her shoulders. The day was drawing to a close. Tiffany had already boiled the potatoes, cut the sausage, and opened a can of stew. Your son was very thoughtful, not daring to leave him in the woods without food, Oscar said, but he immediately regretted it. Tiffany grew sad again, thinking, yes, that's the way it is, raising my only son. You spare nothing for him, and he takes you to the woods, to a cold hut, she sighed. Don't worry so much, Tiffany. People live everywhere, and you're your own here. This is your homeland. The Karelian forest. It has some kind of ancestral memory, protects those who were born and grew up under its pines. Everything will be all right. I know, the man smiled. Tiffany thought. What brings him here? He's certainly not from around here. Tiffany and Oscar became friends. The woodsman visited the woman every day, helping her with chores. Oscar fixed furniture that Tiffany remembered from when she was a little girl. He brought water, helped with firewood. Tiffany fed him a delicious lunch. I saw lights on in some of the houses, people living. I guess they're not leaving, she asked Oscar one day. They are. There are 10 houses left from the whole village, he replied. Mostly the ones the children don't need, and the lonely old people. What do they do here? Who keeps cattle? The vegetable garden feeds them. They go to the forest to gather berries and mushrooms. They catch fish in the lake, then sell them in town. And there's nothing else to do here. Televisions aren't always on. Do they have televisions in the houses? Tiffany got excited. She was bored alone. She was also bored with the soap operas she liked to watch in the city in the evenings. Yes, but the connection sometimes goes down, especially in the winter. Tiffany suddenly got up from the table and went to the wardrobe. There were things that Miles had hastily thrown into bags. She found among them her card, which was to be used to pay the woman's work and pension. Here she handed the card to the forester. This is my card. What is it? The man didn't understand. I beg you, let's go to the shop and buy me a TV set. Please, she asked, her palms folded across her chest. Oscar thought for a moment. The nearest shop was 80 kilometers away. It would take all day to get there and back. But Tiffany looked at him with such pleading eyes that he couldn't refuse her. All right, we'll take my car tomorrow, the man agreed. Tiffany smiled happily. She was growing to like this strong man with such a familiar name. He reminded her very much of her father. 2 months passed, summer came. One warm evening, Oscar and Tiffany were having tea in the yard. The forester had made a small table. Tiffany tied a tablecloth on it. The trees swayed quietly around them, enjoying the pleasant company and tranquility. The woman suddenly thought that nothing ever just happens. Perhaps she should have come back here a long time ago, she wondered to herself. She liked preparing the vegetable garden for planting. She liked setting up the house, making it cozy. Tiffany, Oscar said to her, "You and I are both old. We live here together and we don't seem to get bored." "What's there to be bored about?" "I'll plant a vegetable garden soon and then I'll take care of it," Tiffany told him. Yes, a vegetable garden is certainly something to do. But that's not what I meant. "Well, Tiffany, let's live together." The woman looked at Oscar in surprise. In his kind eyes there was so much hope, warmth, life experience. "We're hardly ever apart, Oscar. I mean, let's live together, run the household, and watch your TV series in the evenings." He looked so touching in his uncertainty that Tiffany couldn't stand it and held out her hand to him. "Come on, Oscar. It really is more fun together." Without hiding his joy, the man put his arms around Tiffany, held her tightly against him, and stroked her gray hair. One day, returning from the forest, Oscar brought a small fawn into the house. The animal was wounded and looked weak, almost lifeless. "What's wrong with it, Oscar?" Tiffany asked, putting aside the basin of laundry. "He's trapped, the little fellow. I guess the poachers were at it again. I had to rescue the little lynx." "Wow, a lynx. He's healthier than a big cat," said Oscar. "Bring the first aid kit, please." He treated the wound on the lynx's leg, applied a bandage with ointment, and calmed the animal down. "He'll stay with us for a while and then we'll see." An old dog box was re-equipped for the lynx. We had to renew the boards and make an enclosure out of metal mesh. The lynx was named Rex. This was the name of the previous owner of the box. But he was a dog, not a wild cat. The pet was very affectionate, licking Tiffany's hand as she stroked and bandaged him. A few days later, Oscar returned with a large box. There were 12 chickens in it. "That's not nothing," he said proudly, showing Tiffany the chickens lurking at the bottom of the carton. "Now we'll always have fresh eggs." "Oh my God, Oscar, where are we going to keep them?" Tiffany spluttered. "It's not a problem. Tomorrow morning I'll start building a chicken coop, and then I'll build a stable. We'll have a cow, goats, geese, piglets. We'll have our own farm." Tiffany only shook her head, smiling and enjoying Oscar's thriftiness. It was not a problem for him to get the wood to build buildings. That's why Oscar decided not to be petty. And in just a month, not only the barn, the chicken coop, and the pen for geese and ducks, but also a new bathhouse grew in the yard of the house. Tiffany was overjoyed when the first smoke appeared from the chimney. "In time, we'll renovate the house," Oscar promised. "As long as I have the strength, I'll do it all." Once a month, Tiffany and Oscar drove into town to withdraw money from their cards and get Oscar's salary. At the same time, they would stop by the market and sell eggs, milk, and poultry to the vendors. The price was not high, but they did not want to trade themselves. They had to go back and do farming. Having made the necessary purchases, they would go home. One day on their way back, they noticed a car on a forest road. "It's not ours, some tourists, probably," Oscar suggested and pulled up next to the unfamiliar car. "Hello. Do you need any help?" "Good evening." A man in his 40s approached Oscar. "My car broke down. No matter how hard I try, it won't start." "Let me have a look," the forester offered. He looked under the bonnet of the foreign car, touched and moved something. "It's bad, it needs repair," said Oscar. "Where is there to repair?" asked the man. "I looked on the navigator. There are no settlements nearby." 2 boys of about 8 or 10 years old jumped out of the strange man's car. They were followed by a woman. Oscar looked at the family and said decisively, "Let's go to our place." Tomorrow morning I'll take you to the service. There's a cable. The men hooked the foreign car with the cable, and everyone settled down. Oscar dragged the broken car to the village. Here we are, he said. And Tiffany, inviting the guests in, added, "Come inside." She led the woman and her children inside. It turned out they had traveled a long way. "We've wanted to see the local sights for a long time, but the car was a little slow," the woman said. "My name is Natalie, and these are our sons Miles and Nicholas." The boys sat down near the enclosure with a lynx, looking at it in surprise. Everything in the house and in the yard seemed strange. In the evening, everyone gathered round the table outside. Oscar and Natalie's husband Travis grilled meat on the barbecue, and the women prepared vegetables and herbs. For such an occasion, Oscar got a bottle of moonshine from somewhere. To getting acquainted to meeting. "Here's to your car being repaired quickly," he said, pouring it into shot glasses. Everyone present supported him. The evening was wonderful. Natalie put the children to bed in the house. They barely made it to bed. The hosts and guests all sat around talking, drinking fragrant tea with forest herbs. And the next day, Travis's car was taken to the service center. It turned out that it would be ready only the next day, and the men returned to Oscar and Tiffany's house. The guests had brightened up the homeowners' lives. All day the boys tended to the animals, fed carrots to the rabbits, carried hay for the cow and collected eggs in the hen house, and then drank steamed milk. Travis and Oscar chopped wood and stacked it in a neat stack, and the women cooked meals. In the evening, everyone went to the lake, swam and boated, and when they returned, a real bathhouse was waiting for them. It was a wonderful weekend. "Thank you," the guests thanked the hospitable hosts. "We could not even imagine that this is such a wonderful holiday, and we really enjoyed it." "Come back again," Oscar said, shaking Travis' hand in farewell. "You bet we will, and we'll bring our friends with us," he promised, as the car with the new friends drove off down the street. Oscar said to Tiffany, "I think it's time to start building guest houses." All summer, Tiffany worked in the vegetable garden, harvesting crops and making preparations for the winter. Oscar got serious about building an addition to the house. He enjoyed having visitors, and in his heart he hoped that Travis would keep his promise and come on holiday to visit them. The man and woman went to the woods to pick berries and mushrooms, made jam and pickled vegetables, and in the long winter Tiffany knitted warm socks, mittens, and other things from the rabbit's wool. So the winter flew by, followed by spring. The elderly couple's household gradually expanded, and the chores became more troublesome. One evening they were finishing digging a plot of land for planting potatoes, when suddenly a few cars drove up to the house one after another. "Who's that, Oscar?" Tiffany wondered. "Let's see," replied her husband, and went to the gate. Travis walked towards him. "Well done, master," he shouted when he saw Oscar. "How are you? Are you well?" "Healthy, thank God," he said. "Tiffany, look who's here." The men hugged each other, happy to see each other. "Will you take me in? I want to stay for a week, go fishing, walk in the woods, just relax," Travis asked. "Why do you ask? We are only glad to have such guests." Oscar smiled, patting his friend on the shoulder. "But you see, I didn't come alone." "How many of you are there?" asked the owner. "Is this all of you coming to our place?" He pointed to the cars. "Yeah, we'll sort it out among the guests." People started pouring out of the cars. Men, women, children. And before Tiffany could catch her breath, she was surrounded by young women, shaking hands and calling out their names, asking her where to take her things and her groceries. "To the house, girls, to the house," Tiffany replied, confused. Gradually, things calmed down and there was no more fuss. The women began to prepare the food, and the men set up some tents in the yard. What clever people, Tiffany thought. The children had beds in the house and the adults were in the yard. The noise, the fun, the joy of the children's voices settled into Tiffany and Oscar's previously quiet home for a week. The children enjoyed feeding the animals, going to the lake with their parents, and playing outside. The women helped Tiffany, even though she refused to help. After all, people were here on holiday. The men had plenty to do all day long, and they enjoyed it all because of the variety. Oscar even took the guests hunting. And how they enjoyed fishing. Tiffany collected gifts for the guests: socks and mittens made of rabbit wool, jam made of wild berries, pickled and salted mushrooms, and smoked fish caught by the guests themselves. For a long time the hosts hugged and could not part with their guests. They had become so close during that week, and when the townspeople left, Tiffany found money and a card under the tablecloth in the room, wishing them well and hoping they would meet again. "So we've made our first money on our farm," Oscar smiled happily. He felt that soon there would be new guests in the house, and he was not mistaken. A week later, another group of 3 families arrived. "Travis told me you guys have a great holiday here," said a man named Scott. "It's a good holiday. Come on in the yard," Oscar said. "Rumors abound, but good things come to good." A few years flew by unnoticed. Now, from May to September, tourists from different cities came to visit Tiffany and Oscar, some for a day or two, and some for a week. Oscar had built several summer houses, bought 2 boats, and installed a drip irrigation system. People from megalopolises and noisy cities liked to relax surrounded by wild, untouched nature. The hosts did not demand payment for accommodation and did not set any rates. After all, the guests helped them in many ways. But the tourists always left money, which Oscar invested in new buildings, the purchase of fodder for cattle and other necessary things. That day they were waiting for the next guests. "Look, someone is coming," Oscar shouted to the woman. "I think it's ours." A black Jeep stopped at the gate, and a man got out. He looked with surprise at the good house with beautiful carved plait bands, at the strange man, at the links in the enclosure. "Don't you recognize him?" "My son is here," Tiffany said quietly, shielding her eyes from the sun with her hand. She took a few steps forward and smiled, bowing her head. "Hello, son." "Hello." Walter's legs gave out at the sight of his mother, healthy, beautiful, and cheerful. He hugged his mother and sobbed, stroking her head. Tiffany softly spoke the words that Oscar had once said to her. "This is our homeland here, son, the Maine woods. It somehow keeps the memory of our ancestors alive, protects those who were born and raised beneath its pines. It's going to be okay. I know it will."